I really don't think Stan Twitter is going to be happy about my takes on this one. Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. So High School Musical, the musical, the series, is one that people have wanted me to make a follow-up video on for a long time, and it's honestly one that I never thought I would make a follow-up video on, but here we are today. This series has to be one of the main ones that comes to mind for me when I think about complicated ship timelines. Cause like, what do you do when half of your main ship leaves mid-show? And also when the lines between reality and fantasy get blurred. And while the solution that they chose seemed to satisfy a lot of fans, I feel like it's safe to say that it also disappointed a lot of them as well. I know for me personally, I stopped watching like early season 2 just because I wasn't really enjoying it that much anymore, and it was also just like hard to watch it amongst all of the driver's license drama. But I do feel like now is a pretty good time to revisit it now that enough time has passed. And if anything, I'm thankful that this video got me to watch the 4th season because I did end up really enjoying that one. But I am getting a little bit ahead of myself, and so let's start off first by jumping into chapter 1. Alright, so first off, I have to give you a little bit of a rundown of the history of Ricky and Nini that takes place before the show begins. So they are basically the epitome of childhood best friends to lovers. He is the reason as to why she goes by Nini today, as when they were kids, he couldn't get his vowels right, and so he called her Nini instead of Nina, and it just sort of stuck. She is also the reason as to why he goes by Ricky today instead of his full name, which is Richard, as she felt like nobody under the age of 50 should go by that name. Throughout the course of the show, we learned that the two of them were pretty inseparable as kids, and apparently Ricky didn't make things easy for her while growing up. He microwaved her Barbie, ran over her lemonade stand, ate her science project, but even though he gave her a hard time, it wasn't because of malintention, as he actually reveals during the first season that she was his first crush. We also find out that the two of them shared their first kiss together in Nini's treehouse where their braces interlocked. Once the two of them made it to high school, the relationship quickly became more than that as the two of them became a couple. We don't exactly know how that transition happens as it takes place before the show begins, but considering how close they described their relationship as kids, I can only imagine that it was a fairly natural transition. So then we are introduced into their story almost a year after their relationship at what seems to be the end of it. We find out through flashbacks that Nini posted an anniversary video for Ricky on her Instagram, and in that video she sings a song to him that she wrote that alludes to her telling him that she loves him. After he watches the video with her, she tells him that it's true and that she does love him, and then that is when things start to go south. Ricky says that her video was a really big thing to post online, and she's also doing this right before going away to summer camp. And so he says that he's been thinking and she's only going to be gone for a month, and that they're not even sure how good her cell service is going to be. And so this is when he asks that they take a temporary pause.
I've been thinking, and you're just gonna be out of town for like a month, right? And you'll probably have no reception in the woods. Maybe we should just like chill for a minute. You know, like take a temporary pause.
Pause. Yeah, I totally get that.
So definitely not the best response to receive from your boyfriend of almost a year after you tell him that you love him, especially when they do have so much history as I previously went over. But as the show goes on, we do come to find out as to why Ricky reacted this way, so we'll wait on grilling him for now. Nonetheless, this brings Nini to go and spend her summer at theater camp, and this is where she ends up meeting someone new, for probably the first time in her life, just considering how intertwined her and Ricky's lives were. So she meets EJ and they come to have a little bit of a showmance, as he plays the Music Man and she plays the librarian in their production of The Music Man. But this is only after the female lead got sick and couldn't go on, causing Nini to take her place. And then we finally catch up to the present day. It's their first day back at school and Ricky is determined to get a fresh start with Nini. Apparently he tried to date other girls over the summer, but all he talked about was her. And Nini, on the other hand, didn't want to take a pause to begin with. So she's just trying to move on with EJ and figure out the right way to break this news to Ricky. And the right way that she decides on is by doing so very bluntly. So he comes up to her locker asking her what's good, and she tells him that she needs to talk to him. So she tells him that she met someone else at camp, and then he interrupts her asking her if she's joking. But then this just causes her to get upset with him, saying that he knows what he did, or better, what he didn't do. But Ricky is just flabbergasted at the fact that she is blowing him off for what he calls a quote-unquote theater punk. Nini then reminds him that he's the one who dumped her, but then he says that it was a break and not a break up. This causes Nini to apologize, but say that it's a breakup now.
You're blowing me off for some theater punk you met 4 weeks ago? At a lake?
You kind of dumped me.
It was a break. It wasn't a break up.
I'm sorry, Ricky. But it's a breakup now.
So honestly, although I do think that Nini's delivery is a little bit harsh here, at the same time, I really don't blame her. To tell your childhood friend turned boyfriend that you love them and get them asking to take a pause in response, I feel like I personally would have been even less kind to him than she was here. And I honestly can't even begin to imagine the amount of hurt that she felt because of that. Following this, Nini says that she feels good and sees it all as a fresh start. Ricky, on the other hand, says that this is terrible and that love is dead. But this is High School Musical, the musical, this series, and so let's get on to that High School Musical part. So this brings us to a school assembly where it is announced that the drama department will be putting on East High's very first production of High School Musical. Of course, this has led Nini and EJ to decide to try to shoot for Troy and Gabriella. Ricky then gets involved with this when he decides to shoot for the role of Troy as well. This coming after he sees a post online with EJ and Nini alluding to them being cast as the leads. So he decides that he's going to audition and nothing in the world is going to stop him. The following day, we actually have a scene from season 4 that apparently took place on this day, so I guess I'll talk about it now. So this is when Gina comes in. She's just moved here, is very talented, and has just been encouraged to find her purpose at East High. She then meets Ricky in the hallway, who stops her to ask her opinion on his plans to get Nini back together with him. I personally find it a little bit unrealistic that he would lay all of this on some random person that he's just met in the hallway, but for the sake of the story, we're just gonna have to suspend our disbelief a little bit. So he gives her a rundown explaining their breakup and tells her about his plans to play her song back to her outside her window. Gina then suggests that maybe he doesn't love her, full stop, which I think I could get behind that being the answer if the rest of the events from this season didn't happen. And this line and just scene overall kind of bugged me because it felt like they were trying to change the previous narrative, but we'll get to that. So she says that what Nini did took guts and that if he really loves her, then he owes it to her to make his song more public. So he tells her that he's trying out for the musical because of her, and so she suggests that he play the song there. And apparently this whole interaction gave Gina the idea to audition for the musical as well. So then we see Ricky watching the movie in the library to prepare, but then this causes him to run late to the auditions because the computer that he was using to watch the movie on freezes. Meanwhile, at the auditions, Nini is up next. We see EJ give her a pep talk after she starts freaking out, and he even tells her that he loves her, which just brings her right back to when she said it to Ricky. And speaking of, he then comes in late right when Nini is about to go. Everyone gets a bit flustered, and then EJ yells to Nini that she's got this, causing Miss Jen, who is the head of the drama department, to spill her coffee and the lights go out. She tells her to wait until the lights go on because she doesn't want to throw her, but she says that she's not thrown and goes on to do her audition in the dark. And then Ricky goes on to do something that I feel like probably would have made me forgive him just immediately. It is just so precious, and it honestly makes me want to cry every time I rewatch it. But he comes up with the idea of taking his phone's flashlight out and shining it on her as a spotlight, which is just so incredibly sweet. And for the sake of fairness, I feel like I do have to mention that EJ does join in on this. And then this brings us to Ricky's audition, which starts off a bit rocky. That is until he goes off book and starts talking about his relationship with Nini using the High School Musical characters as cover. He explains that he has a hard time saying I love you due to his parents and their divorce. And we do come to see throughout the first season that this claim is backed up, as he's got a lot going on at home. And while this obviously doesn't excuse the pain that he caused Nini, I feel like it does offer an explanation and room for forgiveness, especially after how hard he works to earn it in this episode and honestly just season overall. So he says that he was just waiting for the right time to say it so that everyone would hear it, which is kind of contradicting to the scene that they added in with Gina, but I'll let you guys choose whatever you want to believe. He then says that he prepared his own song and takes his guitar out singing the song that Nini wrote for him. At first, Nini is unimpressed, but then we see her open up a bit throughout the song. She even cracks a smile at one point, but tries to hide it. After the auditions, Nini runs out to him and asks him what he's doing, and she says that he hates musicals and reminds him of the time that he got kicked out of The Greatest Showman. But Ricky retorts that that's the old him and that the new him thinks musicals are awesome. So she says that the old her was heartbroken and she had to go away to find herself, telling him that he doesn't get to show up now just to try and confuse things. Ricky is hurt that she thinks that's why he's there, and so he says that that's not it, that he's always believed in her and them even if he sucked at showing it. Nini is speechless, and then Ricky tries again to say that he loves her, but it doesn't exactly come out well, and then Nini is whisked away to see the posted cast list.
I always believed in you, in us, even if I sucked at showing it. That's why I'm here.
Clear! Carlos is posting the cast list.
Don't. Not. Chelsea.
Now, I personally feel like this is a little bit of an underrated moment. Ricky stuttering that he doesn't not love her is just so special to me, and Nini being lost for words I feel like is the perfect way for them to hint at the love that she has for him still being there, especially after seeing just how harsh she was with him throughout this entire episode. But I mentioned the cast list, so of course Nini is cast as Gabriella, and then in a shocking twist, Ricky is cast as Troy. EJ is cast as Chad, and then we end the episode with Nini looking concerned between both boys. On to episode 2, we start off with the cast's first read-through, which begins with everyone being forced to hold hands. So Ricky and Nini hold hands, as well as EJ and Ricky, and Nini is able to look past Ricky to EJ while they're holding hands. Later, Ricky looks on as Nini fixes EJ's collar, and then the two of them go to kiss, but then she checks her phone instead. And then this causes EJ to shoot daggers at Ricky, thinking that he is the source of the text. And I don't want you to forget about this little texting moment because it does become relevant later on. So now we're at our next rehearsals where Carlos, the choreographer, is trying to teach them their dance for the bows. But this isn't exactly going over smoothly as both Nini and Ricky are confused as to why they're going over the end of the production. Nonetheless, they still go on to try to do the dance but are all out of sync. Then this causes Nini to get upset with Ricky for feeling as though he's not there for the right reasons. She starts to raise her voice at him, and so then Carlos calls a 5, and Ricky goes after her saying that he does take it seriously. She insists that he doesn't, that he just coasts, and the second someone asks him to make a commitment, he cracks a joke or sinks into an invisible hole in the floor. So clearly this is about their I love you moment and not actually what's going on in rehearsal. Ricky catches on to this and says that he didn't sink, he just wasn't ready to say it yet, and that he went to the audition to show her how he feels. But she doesn't believe that that was the real reason, saying instead that it was only because she met someone else and he wanted to drag her back to 10th grade, like their summer had never happened. She then tells him that if he really cared about her, then he would let someone else who actually wants to play the part play it.
You don't take anything seriously. You coast, and the second someone asks you to make a commitment, you make a joke, or you sink into some imaginary hole in the floor.
I didn't sink. Nini, I just wasn't ready to say it then. But I went to that audition to show you.
Because I had met someone else. You wanted to drag me back into 10th grade like my summer had never happened. But if you really cared about me, Ricky, you'd let somebody who wants to play this part play it.
So it's hard because obviously I do understand where Nini is coming from. She was hurt by him, and then she went through everything that she had to go through to be able to get over him, and now she finally feels like she's at a place where she feels good again, and it feels like he's trying to undo all of that work. But unfortunately, I feel like the way that she's acting is also kind of making her character come across as being a little bit unlikable. And I feel like the way in which we were introduced into the story doesn't help with that either, with like having Ricky as the protagonist and us sympathizing with him, but I don't know, maybe that's just me. My point is that I feel like Nini is a little bit annoying in this first season, and also Ricky can be annoying in it as well, so I guess they're just meant to be. And so Ricky leaves the rehearsal, and we see him tell his friend Big Red that he made a huge mistake and just made everything worse. Carlos runs after him, asking him to come back, but he tells him to tell Miss Jen that he's done. He decides that Nini is right and that he doesn't belong on stage. He feels as though if he goes back now, then Nini will probably quit and that they need her more than they need him. And then in comes Gina once again. She overhears all of this, and it gives her the idea to meddle. Some background on her is that she's been cast as Nini's understudy, and so now she thinks that if she can get Ricky back in, then Nini will be out, which would in turn leave her with the main role, which is what she wants. So then Gina finds Ricky at the skate park. She asks if it's true that he dropped out, and he says that it's not official yet, but yeah. So she plays disappointed by this, saying that she liked having an outsider keep them on their toes and giving them some street cred, but he argues that it would be better to have someone who could actually keep time. She reasons that he just has his own style, and then he kind of stares at her for a bit before leaving. We then come to see that Gina's plan does end up working, or at least half working, as Ricky then decides to stay up all night and practice to prove to Nini that he's not a quitter. The following day, Ricky shows Carlos what he's learned in the library. Carlos helps him with the last step, and then Nini overhears this and sees them practicing. This leads her to the auditorium where she stumbles upon Ashlyn, who is EJ's cousin and also in the production as Miss Darbus. And this is important because remember earlier when she got a text that he thought was from Ricky, this caused him to go to Ashlyn and ask her to steal Nini's phone for him. She obviously said no to this, but now that the two of them are talking, Nini reveals to her that one of her moms keeps sending her these like fortune cookie-like text messages throughout the day, revealing that the text that she got before was from one of her moms and not Ricky. But speaking of Ricky, he then comes in while Nini joins in on Ashlyn's song, and he watches them while they sing before calling them to rehearsal. Moving on to said rehearsal, EJ asks her where she was, and Nini is a little bit flustered in response to this due to the fact that she just shared a bit of a moment with Ricky. But she just says that she was hanging with Ashlyn. Ashlyn. EJ is confused by this at first, but then notices her phone in his bag, thinking that Ashlyn took it. He mouths a thank you to her, and then Gina replies to him, revealing that she's actually the one that took it. Her reason for this being that she says that they both want the same thing, which I feel like is not true, because while yes, they are both understudies for the lead, while she wants to be Gabriella, EJ wants Nini to be Gabriella. So, not true, but I do understand that she's just kind of trying to cause havoc here. Nonetheless, EJ now has Nini's phone, and he does not hesitate in snooping through it. He is quick to find her archived love song to Ricky, and then he gets upset over the fact that Ricky got a song and not him. And I was honestly a little bit surprised to find out that he didn't know about the song, and that whole like breakup pause sort of situation. I know they've only been together for a couple months or so, but still I feel like those early stages of a relationship is when you tell them about what happened in your previous relationship. Especially now after Ricky has really inserted himself back into their narrative. But I think that that is just further proof that this relationship is more of a rebound situation than an actual love connection. Anyways, Nini's phone then gets a call from Ricky, and he is quick to try and answer it, but luckily Ashlyn takes the phone away from him. She advises him to return her phone and not listen to the voicemail, but of course EJ goes on to do the opposite, as he then listens to the message before deleting it. So I think that it's safe to say that we are just moving further and further away from EJ and Nini having any sort of future together. And now you're probably wondering what that voicemail was about. So Ricky called to ask Nini if she felt that moment that they shared during Ashlyn's song. But then he says if that's all too much, then they can just ignore it altogether. This brings us to our following day at rehearsals, where Ricky asks Nini how her night was, and she says that it wasn't too hot before she excuses herself. This causes him to wonder if it was maybe because of his voicemail. But the real reason as to why she's not in a good mood is because of Gina. She texted everybody and told them to come in early for rehearsal, as she knew that Nini didn't have her phone. This causes Nini to wonder if maybe she was the one who took her phone, and so she decides to steal her dance shoes in response. Later, Nini shows EJ what she did, and he is upset with her, saying that this isn't like her. This confuses Nini, as she thought that he would be proud, but he says that stealing is a little low and that he thought that she was better than that. She eventually agrees with him and is happy that he sees her that way, going on to praise him for having a better moral compass than her, which obviously causes EJ to look very guilty. Somehow Nini is oblivious to all of this though, and so she thanks him and kisses him before leaving. So now the guilt is really starting to eat EJ alive, and he decides to go to Ashlyn to talk about it. He now knows that he needs to apologize, and so he comes up with the idea of apologizing through song. Ashlyn reminds him that this is a bad idea because he's never written a song in his life, but does go forward in helping him by giving him a backing track and advising him to dig deep. This brings us to after school that day, where we see that EJ has gone against her advice, as the song has absolutely no heart at all. This causes EJ to admit that he can't do it, that this is her thing with Ricky, and that she'll see right through it. So he rearranges his plans and decides to find her after rehearsal tomorrow to tell her straight up what happened and apologize. But of course, that is not how things end up going. So during rehearsal, EJ and Ricky are working on a scene together, and it's quite stiff. This causes Miss Jen to decide to have them pass the ball around a little bit to loosen up. But this exercise quickly turns into them just throwing slight disses at one another instead, and ends with Ricky accidentally hitting EJ in the face with the ball. This causes EJ to decide not to confess now to Nini because he's worried that it'll make Ricky look like the good guy. We then see Ricky attempt to apologize to EJ and insist that it was an accident, but EJ is not very convinced of this, and he asks him to stay away from Nini. Ricky is confused by this, saying that he was just trying to apologize and make the best out of a bad situation, but EJ retorts that if he's trying to apologize, then he can start with that thirsty voicemail that he left for her.
Dude, I'm just trying to say that I'm sorry.
You want to apologize? You can start with that thirsty voicemail you left for Nini, okay? She doesn't need to hear from you anymore.
What did you just say?
Just go home.
So I feel like this is a hard situation because obviously EJ is in the wrong for stealing her phone and breaching her trust, but at the same time I do have some sympathy for him because of the situation that Ricky has put him in. I mean, he's basically been trying to steal his girlfriend from him for the past week or so, and I get that from Ricky's perspective he's just trying to take back what he lost, but at the same time he's now doing so while she's in a relationship with someone else, which just results in this all being very disrespectful to EJ and their relationship. Nonetheless, him letting this information slip there was just not the brightest move from EJ. And the consequences of this quickly catch up to him after we see Ricky stop Nini after school. He says that he knows that they're not together anymore, but he admits that he thought that there was a little bit of trust left between them. He then asks that the next time he spills his guts to her in a voicemail that she do him a favor and keep it to herself.
I know we're not a couple anymore, okay? I get that. You've been very clear. But I thought there was a little trust left between us. You know, I thought that I still meant something to you.
I just can't do this right now.
Fine. Okay, but the next time I spill my guts out to you in a voicemail, do me a favor and keep it to yourself. I don't need to be hearing from EJ that it's wrong, it's stupid.
Wait, what voicemail?
So now I'm kind of torn by this because I understand that Ricky feels as though something that he told her in confidence has now been weaponized against him. But also, like I just said, he did leave a voicemail to his ex-girlfriend asking if they shared a moment while she is currently in a relationship with somebody else. So if she had told EJ, I do feel like she would have had every right to, because they're not together anymore and he basically just like made a move on her and has been making many moves on her while she's been dating somebody else. But anyways, she is confused, asking what voicemail he's referring to, and then she looks over at EJ and is able to put the pieces together. So then I'm sure, as nobody expected, things then start to go downhill for EJ and Nini. The next day we see EJ running after her after she has clearly been avoiding him. He asks if she's mad at him, to which she doesn't reply, and so then he draws his own conclusions. She then admits that she was in the computer lab getting somebody to hack into her phone and recover the message that he deleted, which I just personally feel like is so telling, because obviously if she was already over Ricky, she would not care about some voicemail that he supposedly left to her. And then this causes EJ to realize that now he has to play defense. So he says that he was spiraling, that he told her that he loved her and she couldn't say it back to him. And I was just so glad to see that this was brought up again, because I personally felt like it was so glossed over in the moment. But instead of focusing on how that made him feel, he instead decides to involve Ricky, saying that she said it to him, that he sees the way that he looks at her and that they have a lot more history than they do. This causes her to cut in that Ricky would never steal her phone, which again, big red flag for EJ and also just like irrelevant to this entire conversation. But I don't think that EJ is blind to this, as he retorts that he knows that and that he just leaves sad face messages on it asking if they shared a moment instead. She then yells at him to not make this about Ricky, which at this point I feel like is impossible because it's very much so about Ricky. And that's exactly what EJ says before he adds that he was just trying to hold on to what they had over the summer. She agrees that she was too, but then says that summer is over now.
I know you guys have a lot more history than we do.
Ricky would never steal my phone.
No, I know. He just leaves sad face messages on it asking if you shared a moment over a song.
Don't make this about Ricky.
That is what this is about. I'm just trying to hold on to what we had over the summer.
Yeah, I was too, but you know what? Summer's over.
So I think it's safe to say that things are not looking good for EJ here. But he then goes on to make things worse by revealing something else that he did that's arguably more shameful than stealing her phone. So he tells her that it wasn't divine intervention that got her the lead part in their summer production, revealing that he actually slipped the lead actress a bad deviled egg on purpose so that she would get to play that part. Nini is speechless in response to this, and then the two of them are called into rehearsal. This then results in the two of them doing a very charged performance of what I've been looking for, after EJ fills in for Ricky, who's not there due to some family problems at home. We later see EJ texting her from outside her house asking if they can talk, and she blocks his number in response, so I think it's safe to say that they are broken up now. And this basically wraps up EJ and Nini, which is good considering what's about to happen between her and Ricky. So later that night, Nini is writing a song about her love life when she hears Ricky at the door. She then goes downstairs and sees that her mom has set up a bed for him on the couch and given him something to change into. Nini is not happy about this, but her mom tries to explain to her that something's going on for him at home and that his mom is back, but he doesn't know for how long. And instead of sympathizing with this and being like, okay, cool, I'll just go back upstairs then so I don't have to run into him, she then gets upset saying that he can't stay the night because she just can't deal with the drama right now and had a really bad day. And I understand that she's a teenager and so her world revolves around her, but I was just like, come on. I mean, him probably deciding to go to her place at all was probably really hard for him, and so her lack of empathy here is just astonishing to me. But her mom seems to reason with her when she says that his bad day was probably worse than hers. Ricky then comes downstairs and her mom leaves, and he apologizes, saying that he should have asked how she felt about him being there. But she seems to come around and says that it's okay and that if things ever get bad, he can always hang there. This causes him to admit that he's really scared and that things feel different already, which if you guys know my home situation, this might hit a bit too close for me, which is so funny because when I was watching it the first time, I was like, what's the big deal? I have divorced parents. But like, yeah, they divorced when I was 3, and it's much different going through it as an adult, or just, I can't even imagine what it would be like going through it in high school, which is like more complicated for me because I do have younger siblings. But anyways, we're getting into it and I don't want to get into it. We're supposed to be talking about ships. Let's get back to it. So he says that it's really hard for him to talk about it, not with her, but with everyone else. And so she says that he can always talk to her about anything. That things might be weird between the two of them, but they're still friends. This causes them to share a moment before she quickly jumps up and changes the subject. They share good nights and hug, and then they have a moment once again where he leans in and they almost kiss before she jumps back and says that she can't.
No, I shouldn't.
Yeah, right, no, yeah.
Now I honestly think that this is one of the best moments from the first season. It's just so nice to see Nini with her walls down for once, and I feel like seeing the two of them just talk genuinely like this really helps you see the connection that they have. And I feel like if you're not rooting for them by now, then you definitely are after this scene. So then Nini leaves to go get him another pillow, but then by the time she gets back, he's already gone. But in other news, Gina has been hashing a new plan. So earlier that day, we saw her go to EJ and tell him to stick with her and that she'll help him get Nini back. And so after his text resulted in a blocking, he decided to go to Gina. He says that he wants her back more than anything, and so he asks her what her plan is. And her plan is to take him to the homecoming dance. And so she tells him this, but doesn't allow him to ask any follow-up questions. Probably because she doesn't actually have any answers to those questions, as this is where her plan begins and ends. And speaking of the homecoming dance, that is coming up a lot sooner than expected, as it's in the very next episode. So we start off with Big Red trying to convince Ricky to ask Nini to the dance, but he says that there's no way that he's going to do that the day of, that she hardcore friend-zoned him, and he's also not exactly happy about the fact that he found out about her breakup with EJ through the grapevine instead of her directly. And then Nini, on the other hand, has basically decided to swear off boys. She tells Courtney that she's done with guys who think that they can control her and exes who aren't okay with being just friends. And then this leads to the two of them deciding to have a girls' night together instead. On to the homecoming dance, we see EJ and Gina show up and she tries to convince him to take a photo with her. He says that he didn't agree to that, but she argues that it's all a part of the plan. This causes him to ask her what that plan is again, and she says that all will be revealed. Then later, Gina asks him to go get them some punch, and then Ricky takes this as an opportunity to talk to her one-on-one. He tells her that she can do better than EJ, and so she says that if she wants his opinion, she'll ask. But he says that he's giving it to her anyways because he thought that she was classier than that and not like how everyone says she is. So of course she asks him what everyone says, and then he replies that she's too ambitious for her own good.
Not to intrude on date night, but you can do better than EJ. That guy's bad news.
You're not exactly one to give relationship advice. And when I want your opinion, I'll ask.
Well, I'm giving it anyway, because I sort of thought you were classier than this. But hey, maybe you really are what people say you are.
That is...
Dude, it's a little too ambitious for your own good, or anyone else's.
So I know that Ricky is hurting and whatever, but I just felt like this was really bold. For him to attack Gina like this just felt so out of character for me. And I almost felt like the way that he was acting made it seem like he was almost under the influence of something. He later explains himself to Big Red, saying that she showed up with his ex's ex, but I still feel like that's no excuse for the way that he acted here. On the other side of things, EJ is still at a loss as to what Gina's plan is. And so he asks her again, and she begs him to just go with it. He retorts that he doesn't just go with things, and so she decides to pour punch on him in response, saying that that was her plan before she storms out. And then of course in the confessional she reveals that there was no plan, just like I said earlier, that she just hoped that Nini would come and be fed up with the drama and quit the show. So definitely a bit of a wishful thinking plan on her part. So Gina is about to leave, and then Ricky finds her at coat check offering her $1, and she basically tells him not to start with her. But then he asks her to wait so that he can apologize. And so she does, and then he says that who she hangs out with is her business. He explains that he's an outsider in theater and she's an outsider at East High, and so he thought that they understood each other, and she agrees that they did up until he came after her. He apologizes for this again and then blames his home life for being the cause of it. She is able to relate to this and asks that he give her a ride home to call it even.
You're not the only one with home drama.
I did need to add to yours.
Give me a ride and we'll call it even.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So this is something that I really like to see. I like seeing Ricky being held accountable for his actions and taking responsibility. And I also like seeing Gina challenge him a little bit because I feel like she does so in such a different way than Nini does. So Ricky drops Gina off and he ends up thanking her for the night at the skate park. And he attributes it to being the reason as to why he stayed in the show. They then relate to how nice it is to have somewhere to go after school with being in the musical because they both don't have very stable home lives. Apparently Gina has some struggles with her mom as they're constantly moving around. So Ricky asks what the blow up with her date was about, but she doesn't explain things and just says that she doesn't really date much with how often she has to move. She then goes to leave before adding that she meant what she said at the skate park and then leans in to kiss him on the cheek.
You know, I meant what I said at the skate park about you having your own style. I don't even think I knew how much I meant it when I said it. Good night, Ricky.
Now, even though these two do end up being endgame, I apologize for the slight spoiler, but that's what happens. This is still my favorite story arc of theirs. And this could probably be because they did benefit from the fact that they were the other ship that I feel like you already kind of know isn't the one that's going to be endgame. And so it's almost like you're rooting for the underdog. And I just personally thought that everything felt way less forced in this first season. But all of this is to say that I do really like this car goodbye scene. So all of this brings us to the following day where Ricky and Gina getting closer to one another has not gone unnoticed to the other 2 points of this love square. So the next day they have a photo shoot for the musical. Ricky and Gina compliment one another, and then we see Nini watch over them, unsure about their newfound friendship. We also see EJ go to Gina, confused as to why she now seems happy about being an understudy. He then asks her if she cares about Ricky, and then she basically asks him what the problem with that would be. So clearly that car scene had quite the impact, since Gina is already starting to catch feelings. So then we see Ricky and Gina continue to bond in the following rehearsal. Basically everyone is making suggestions as to how Nini should perform when there was me and you, and Ricky suggests that she do it acoustically, and Gina backs him up on this. But then we come to find out that the musical might be off, as Miss Jen might be getting fired. So after everyone leaves, Gina goes to Ricky and he says that everything is going to be okay. She pushes him on this and he tells her not to go there because he feels as though it can't be done and that he still has too much work to do. And then this ends up hurting her, as she knows that he's referring it to Nini. And so she quickly changes the subject, asking to hear his acoustic song idea instead. He then plays her a beautiful rendition of the song and they share lots of glances at one another, and then afterwards Gina compliments him on it. But he just retorts that she's good at everything else. She asks him to elaborate and he lists dancing, singing, and throwing drinks at people. She says that she hoped he'd forgotten that one, and then he confesses that he can't seem to forget anything about that night. So it turns out that their night also had quite the impact on Ricky as well. And then we see the two of them share a look before Ricky quickly changes the subject back to Miss Jen.
Oh, acting, dancing, throwing drinks in people's faces.
I was sort of hoping you'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, I kind of can't forget about anything that happened to Homecoming.
Now again, I feel like this is just like the height of Ricky and Gina as far as I'm concerned, which is funny because we are still technically in the Nini and Ricky chapter. But I just love this scene as well. I feel like it comes across as so genuine, and it's definitely one of my favorite moments between the couple. But amongst all of this, EJ has found Nini and he is hoping to apologize. So he confesses to all of his wrongdoings from this past season, and this is basically just the start of his apology train as he looks to turn over a new leaf. Unfortunately, Nini doesn't exactly react well to any of this and is confused as to what he's looking to gain by apologizing, but I personally really liked this arc that EJ has in this season a lot, as I feel like it did kind of redeem his character. But moving on to the Miss Jen thing, which does end up getting resolved quite quickly, as they all get together and organize a flash mob to save her. After this, we see Ricky pick up Gina and spin her, which is another great moment, I feel like. And then of course, Nini oversees this and gets sad about it, which honestly I could care less about if they didn't turn around and make me root for them right after this. And also, I guess Ricky having eyes for someone else is all it takes for Nini to want him back. Or maybe that's not 100% accurate, as they did have that almost kiss scene not that long ago. But anyways, we see more of this in the next episode when the two of them are rehearsing the start of something new, and Nini says in her confessional that she has to hand it to him. She says that he worked really hard and that he looks really good now. But then she tries to save it by clarifying that she means in the show, that he looks really good now in the show. Moving on though, it is now Thanksgiving and Ricky and Gina have planned to go to Ashland's Thanksgiving get-together together. So Gina shows up at Ricky's with Thanksgiving cupcakes and also a hat that she's made for him. And then he ends up sharing with her that his mom seems to have a new boyfriend and he's not really too sure how to handle it. She understands this and is able to put exactly into words what he's feeling, which I feel like I'm just now starting to understand that that's part of the reason why I like their connection in this first season so much. I feel like this bond that they've created over their unstable home lives has garnered this really strong connection, and I feel like it also explains why they're gravitating towards one another. And maybe if they would have continued to highlight this in later seasons, then I would like them a little bit more, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But anyways, she advises him to ignore it and push through, encouraging him to just do what makes him happy instead. And so he decides to put his new hat on and the two of them head out. At the party, Nini compliments his hat and he says that it was a gift. He then says that they didn't want to miss the party and she wonders who he means by they, but then Gina enters. Gina and Ricky then share an inside joke and Nini is once again jealous of their connection. But Nini doesn't really have much to worry about, as it seems as though there isn't going to be much of a them. As later on, Gina gets a call from her mom telling her that they're going to have to move again. Afterwards, Ricky asks if she's okay and if she wants to talk about it. She doesn't respond well to this, and so he tells her that he'll call her, but she says that he heard what happened and that there's no point to that. And I feel like I don't really have that much to add here other than the fact that I really felt for Gina in this situation and it just made me so sad for her. So now Ricky gets ready to leave and then Nini stops him asking if he's okay. He then word vomits to her about his mom and her new boyfriend and then throws it in her face asking if that sounds familiar. She's taken aback, asking him to hang on, but then he says that he has to go. And so she folds, saying that he can be mad at her, but he should really talk to his mom, because apparently he always feels better after he does that. But unfortunately, he's still upset about this whole situation and also her friend zoning him, and so he says that he doesn't need advice from a quote-unquote buddy right now.
It's not just Gina, okay? My mom moved out like 2 weeks ago and she's already got a new boyfriend. Sound familiar?
Whoa, no, hang on.
Look, I gotta go, really.
Okay. You can be mad at me all you want, but you should talk to your mom, Ricky. You know, you always feel better when you...
Thanks. I really don't need advice from a buddy right now.
And so yes, Ricky was a pretty big jerk in this scene, but he's going through a lot right now, and so I feel like I can give him a pass with this one. But one thing I did find interesting was the line where she tells him to talk to his mom, because I do feel like it was a really smart way of them to highlight their history, as it kind of shows that Gina might be able to relate to him, but Nini is the one who knows what he really needs. And this is proven when he does take her advice and calls his mom. Whereas Gina's advice was more just so to ignore it, which is fine, but definitely is more of like a coping mechanism than actual advice. But now that Gina seems to be leaving, this does put an end to our triangle for a little bit. And we see Ricky and Nini grow closer in the following episode. So during their next rehearsal, Ricky and Nini get sent off to run the rooftop scene in private, and Ricky apologizes for the other night and she says that it was fine. But then says backhandedly that she said something nice and he acted like a jerk, so I guess it's not fine. He then throws back that she's the one who's been icing him out for weeks and suggests that maybe it was building up. And despite this very unresolved tension, they then decide to start running the scene. Things go really stiffly, and so Ricky suggests that they lose the script and then they are able to open up after they are looking at one another. And then Ricky decides to cut them off mid-scene and asks her if she does remember kindergarten. They talk about them both being the reason for their nicknames today, and Ricky apologizes for using the term buddy as an insult. He then confesses that he's had more mishaps than her and goes to list them off, and then he ends with the fact that he wasn't able to say I love you back. And then this causes Nini to slip on the piano keys in response.
I guess we've had a few mishaps.
Yeah, more me than you, right? I mean, remember when I took out your lemonade stand doing that wheelie?
Yeah, I do.
And then was it 4th grade when I ate your science project about moldy bread?
I think we both suffered on that one.
And then I couldn't even say I love you when you wrote me that song.
Now this is just a great scene, particularly because it is the first time that we've seen them talk about their history together. Obviously I had to inform you guys of all of that when we started the video, as I'm working more so on like a linear format, but the way that they were able to hold that information back until this scene just made it that much more impactful. And it really opens your eyes to how much of their lives have been intertwined and just makes you root for them even more, or at least that's how I feel about it. So the two of them decide to do some vocal warm-ups when Ricky gets a text from Gina. She's basically been ignoring him since the party, and so he's really happy to hear from her. In the text, she apologizes and explains that she has to leave a few days early, and both Nini and Ricky express how bad they feel for her. Nini is able to relate to this even more as she expresses that she's been thinking about attending a performing arts school in Denver. Ricky is excited for her at first until she mentions where it is, but then he goes on to encourage her after she gets insecure about her talent. She argues that he's never been anywhere outside of Salt Lake, so how would he know what her competition is like? And so he brings up his trip to Disneyland as a kid to prove how worldly he is, and then this causes her to bring up Minnie Mouse and the fact that she was his first crush, which causes him to clarify that Minnie was actually his second crush after her. This then brings them to lean in for a kiss before they end up getting interrupted.
That's not fair. My parents took me to Disneyland once, and I met a very talented Minnie Mouse.
Ah, yes, Minnie Mouse, your first crush.
Well, actually, she was my second.
Hey, guys! Hey, guys.
Now what I love so much about this almost kiss, especially in comparison to their last one, is that Nini is the one that initiates it. And also I'm honestly just a sucker for a good best friends to lovers situation, and so him revealing here that she was his first crush was just like the cherry on top of their whole arc in my opinion. Unfortunately though, we find out afterwards that Nini might have not felt the same way about their almost kiss situation, as she goes ahead and tells Courtney that she almost did something stupid. But then she goes and does a complete 180, as in the following episode she shows Courtney the dog tag that she got him as an opening night gift. and she says that he's come a long way and has been great lately. Ricky, on the other hand, has decided to gift her a song, and he decides to play it for Big Red, who is confused and asks him if it's for Gina. But all of this brings us to our big production. So throughout Act 1, Ricky and Nini share looks at one another backstage, and then in a shocking twist, Gina is able to make it back in time for her big dance break. So Ricky watches her through it, and then afterwards they agree that they weren't expecting to see one another again. Back to the musical, Ricky ends up freezing on stage during his big moment after he sees his mom's boyfriend in the crowd. He then tries to get Nini's help to make it through Act 2, but then comes to find out that Courtney invited the dean of the Young Actors Guild to the show, which is the school that Nini was interested in going to. This causes Ricky to make the rash decision that EJ should go on in his place for Act 2. This being due to a combination of his low self-esteem and also feeling a little bit unstable after what he saw. And I understand that he's going through a lot, but I do still feel like the better decision here would have been to talk to Nini about this. I understand that he didn't want to add more to her plate, but at the same time he could have at least warned her that EJ was going to be taking his place. Because instead this just resulted in EJ catching her completely off guard during Act 2. Meanwhile, we see Gina go to Ricky and she asks him if his mom's boyfriend is the only reason why he left. And so he explains that this is Nini's big moment, and so the best thing that he can do for her is sit back and watch. And so she encourages him to do just that, and then he says that he's glad that she's back.
The best thing I could do for her is just take a step back and watch.
Come on then. Let's watch.
I don't know. Seeing that dude in my costume?
Nightmare fuel for sure.
But we owe it to the team.
Let's go watch EJ Caswell sweep himself off his feet.
Now I gotta admit, I'm sorry for the Ricky and Gina shippers, but I do really like this scene, particularly because I like seeing the two of them act as friends. And I honestly like seeing Gina be supportive of Nini and Ricky. And part of me does wish that this is where their story arc, romantically speaking, could have ended. And that's not to say that they don't have some good moments, and I definitely will be highlighting those good moments once we get to them. And season 4 definitely does not disappoint in that regard, but as far as this scene is concerned, I feel like it does wrap up their arc in the first season really well. So Ricky takes Gina's advice and he comes in during breaking free, and this causes Nini to freeze up, unable to take her eyes off of him. EJ is quick to notice this, and so this causes him to decide to go off script and say that we never forget the friends that we make in kindergarten. He then says that he's not the Troy that she wants and takes a step back, and this was just like the ultimate EJ story arc for me in terms of like the entire show. Say what you want about his character, but I could have never seen episode 1 EJ make this sacrifice for Nini. And I just feel like seeing him give up the one thing that he wanted most this season is just proof that he's come a long way. So then Nini goes forward and singing the song directly to Ricky. And then we have a wonderful callback to one of my favorite moments in the series when she takes out her phone and then shines her flashlight on him. Ricky confesses that he's not at his best right now, but she tells him to just look at her, just like Troy did to Gabriella in the original movie, which honestly makes me emotional just thinking about it. But they go on to perform together and the sparks are flying. Meanwhile, we see EJ go to Gina and we get the absolute best reveal, as she thanks him for getting her a plane ticket so that she could still be in the show. And he says that it just didn't seem fair for her to miss all of this. And then she looks at him for what seems like the very first time. And I honestly just feel like this is such a great way at hinting at what's to come for the two of them. And even though if the connection isn't quite there yet in this scene, like I remember when I watched it the first time, I was a bit unsure how I would feel about them, but I feel like him even being thoughtful enough to get her a plane ticket is enough ground building for me. And then this brings us to our iconic final scene. So Ricky finds Nini packing up and he apologizes for the dean leaving early. He says that she doesn't know what she's missing, but Nini says that it's okay and that it looks like she's meant to stay at East High. And then Ricky asks what happens now that the show is over. She makes a joke about all of them going to Denny's, but it was clear that he was actually referring to the two of them. She then goes to leave, and then Ricky sees this as his last chance, and so he yells to her that he loves her. He then begins his monologue, so he starts off by saying that he's loved her ever since she picked up a ukulele and wrote a little song about clouds. He confesses that he meant to say it that night in her room, and he's kicked himself every day since. He then admits that he doesn't know what will happen tomorrow, or even when they leave that door, but what he does know is that he wants this feeling to keep going, because he's not ready for them or for this whole experience to be over quite yet. He wants them to be the real thing, and he thinks that it is, he just needs the chance to prove it. And then she jumps in, reminding him how in musicals they burst into song after they've run out of things to say. And then she says that sometimes it's easier to just kiss, and then they share their big grand reunion kiss.
I want it to be the real thing. I mean, I think it is the real thing. I want a chance to prove it. I do. I mean, look.
Ricky, you know in musicals and people burst into song when they've run out of things to say?
Yeah?
Sometimes it's easier to just kiss.
Yeah? Yeah.
Now, I don't care how much time has passed, I feel like I will always stand by the fact that this is just such a beautiful scene, and it still makes me cry every time I rewatch it. And it's unfortunate because even though we do still have 3 more seasons to cover, I feel like no scene even comes close to topping this one. And honestly, I feel like part of that is due to the fact that it is questionable as to whether or not these characters are actually acting in this moment. It's been confirmed that a lot of the things that Ricky says in his speech was actually him improvising about things that happened between the two of them in real life, and so obviously that just creates a certain type of magic that I feel like they were never able to replicate. And I honestly don't think that that is necessarily a bad thing. So after their kiss, she gives him the necklace that she made for him, which has 2 freaky callback boy engraved on it. And he gives her a guitar pick, which has 2 freaky math girl on it, both obviously being references to the original movie. He also reveals that he wrote her a song, and then she kisses him once more before leaving. Now, while that is basically how we wrap up the first season, in the following one we get the reveal of a scene that apparently came after this one, so I guess I'll talk about that now. So Gina then enters after their confession of love. She congratulates him on his performance, and he agrees that it felt really good to do something right for once. But he feels as though she wouldn't be able to relate to that because she's just perfect at everything she does. But she argues that she actually doesn't do anything right the first time, and then she starts to cry. He encourages her to say what she needs to say, and so she confesses that she wouldn't quit on them if she wasn't moving away. She then says that she's going to give him a hug and then leave with her head held high.
I wouldn't quit on us if I wasn't moving away. So now, I'm gonna give you a really tight hug, and then I'm gonna walk away with my head held high. Okay?
Now, this whole addition to the story just kind of angers me. I feel like it's such a 180 in comparison to the last Ricky and Gina scene that we had. And for her to go from encouraging him to support Nini to then crying about how she feels about him just feels like a big jump to make, especially in such a short span of time. And I just personally feel like her previous reaction makes way more sense, as like realistically, they didn't even really have that many moments throughout this first season. But to give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe it just hit her last minute as she was leaving as to how strongly she does actually feel for him. Which, talk about a hard position to put Ricky in. The guy just got back together with his girlfriend that he's been fighting for this entire season, and then he gets this confession from this other girl that he had a somewhat thing with. I definitely do not blame him for not saying much in this moment, because I honestly don't know how I would react in it either. And I guess that in his mind it doesn't really matter how he reacts either, since she's leaving directly after this. But I do feel like out of respect for his girlfriend, he probably should have told Nini that this happened. But you know what, maybe he did. We do have a bit of a time jump in between the 2 seasons, so who am I to say whether he told her or not. But the unfortunate part about this confession is Gina is then offered to move in with Ashlyn. So she might not be moving away after all. And we also get the reveal that Nini actually did get into the conservatory. So we do get a little taste as to what's to come in the second season, which is basically when things start to fall apart for the couple, but we do get a couple nice moments beforehand. But first, let's talk about season 1 now that we've covered it in full. I feel like a lot of people attribute it to being the best season of the series overall, and I feel like the main reason for that is because it is so ship content heavy, especially when it comes to like the main love square situation. I feel like with this season, even more so than the ones that came after, I was pausing every 5 seconds to take notes. Whereas I can't exactly say the same about the seasons that we have coming up next. And in some aspects that was good because it meant that we got to see the side characters more, and in others I feel like it just resulted in some fairly boring episodes and arguably seasons overall. Especially when it comes to the second season. I know a lot of people argue that that's the worst one of the show, and I feel like I would have to agree with that. Although there is one aspect in particular that makes me not want to go so hard on the season, and we'll get to that. A quick disclaimer before we get into it though is that this season was shot incredibly dark, and I have no idea why. I honestly felt like there were many moments throughout this season that I was just yelling at them to turn on the lights. And I haven't exactly decided what I want to do about that yet when it comes to like my own editing choices for this video. So if things do end up looking kind of like normal and not too dark and you're like, what were you talking about? That might be because I couldn't resist the urge to adjust things myself. But with all that being said, enough yapping, Caitlin, let's jump right into season 2. So we start off during Christmas break. Ricky is ecstatic that him and Nini are back, and he says that they're better than ever. Whereas Nini is struggling with the fact that she has accepted her offer to the Young Actors Guild, or YAC if you will, and she has yet to tell Ricky that she has to leave in just over a week. So then we see the two of them having their Christmas gift exchange. Nini gets him a new skateboard and he gets her a song as money is tight for them right now. He plays the song for her and we see them have a snowball fight outside as well as kiss under the mistletoe. Afterwards, she compliments the song and he says that he has has to stay in shape for the spring musical, and that he just can't wait to do it all over again. And I absolutely love this aspect. I love that he did something out of his comfort zone and ended up finding something that he actually does love to do. I feel like that's part of the beauty of relationships and introducing your partner into something new. He then goes on to make an analogy saying that he's never walking off stage in the middle of a show again. He says that their relationship is one that he can always count on and that she's his home.
I honestly can't wait to do it all over again. And I'm never walking off stage in the middle of a show again. Because this, us, it's like the one thing I can always count on.
So they're definitely just digging a bigger hole for Nini to have to climb her way out of, but I do also think that it is really important to highlight this comfort that Ricky feels with Nini. And I feel like him and his feelings get downplayed a lot throughout this season, and I really don't want to do that myself when I'm covering it. And so I feel like it's important to note that with everything changing in his life, she was probably the only sense of security that he had, which is honestly quite sad, and I do really feel for the guy. But then we move on to our cast New Year's party. Nini says that she tried to tell Ricky about her leaving on the way over, but he insisted on singing Bet on It the whole way instead. And I should also mention that they made it seem like she was going to tell him before their gift exchange as well, but then chickened out. So while at the party, we see the two of them do a mini rendition of You Are the Music and Me and almost kiss, but get interrupted. Then Miss Jen crashes the party and reveals that they're not doing High School Musical 2 this year, which was probably the first sign of things going south this season. But instead, they're going to be doing Beauty and the Beast. Ricky says that he's in if Nini's in, and then this causes her to blurt out that she's moving to Denver.
I'm in if you're in.
Ricky, I'm moving to Denver.
And I do feel like this move to Denver is basically the start of their downfall. And so with all that being said, let's move on to chapter 2. I almost said season 2. We're already there. So in the following episode, Ricky says that he of course wished that Nini could have told him sooner, but at the same time he doesn't blame her, saying that the last time that she told him she was leaving, he asked to put a pause on their relationship. And I really liked this part because I feel like it showed the growth of his character, and I really like how he was able to draw that connection. This brings us to their goodbye, where Nini gets mad at him for crying, but he insists that he's not and that he's just allergic to his girlfriend moving to Denver. He then says that he's going to FaceTime her every morning when she wakes up, and she says that they're going to make this long distance thing look easy, and then they kiss.
I'm gonna FaceTime you every morning as soon as I wake up.
Okay. Maybe not as soon as I wake up.
Fine. but definitely plus or minus 300 times a day.
At least. We are going to make this long distance thing look easy.
Okay.
And again, I just feel like this is such great growth in comparison to the couple's first breakup in the last season. And I do feel like this is a really good goodbye, and it definitely tugs at your heartstrings. He then gives her a snow globe of Salt Lake as a going away present, and she says that she's going to shake it every time she misses him. And then she shakes it, alluding to the fact that she already misses him. But enough of all of that, as it's time for our next semester at East High. So we see Ricky and Nini on FaceTime, and he confesses that he's not sure if he's going to audition for Beauty and the Beast, as he says that it's hard for him to imagine doing so without her and that she's his rock. And so she encourages him to think about doing it for himself this time instead of her, which again I love, and it's just so nice to see Nini being the one to encourage him here, as I feel like it also shows growth from her character. So Ricky does end up auditioning, and we later see him call Nini once again and reveal that he got the role of the Beast. He then goes to sincerely thank her for telling him to audition, but then the call ends up dropping mid-sentence. So obviously hinting at the fact that this long distance thing isn't going to be as easy as they thought. But on to episode 3, where we have a classic case of cat and mouse. So Nini decides to surprise Ricky by coming home for Valentine's Day, but he has the same idea, and so he decides to go to Denver to surprise her. And they also both have the same idea of doing an outdoor serenade that doesn't exactly go over as planned. Over FaceTime once again, Nini says that she is flattered that he went all the way to Denver just to wish her a happy Valentine's Day. But he clarifies that it was actually to sing it, as he did write her a song. She's elated as she wrote him a song too and asks to hear it, but then they get interrupted by Ricky getting called in to rehearsal. Afterwards, they're on FaceTime once again, and Ricky asks her to come over after school. But then she reveals that she's actually in the hospital because one of her moms twisted her ankle. And now it's time to be reminded of the other point of our love square, which is of course Gina. So she comes over while Ricky is rehearsing his song, and he's very surprised to see her as he was expecting Nini. She apologizes, saying that she should have called, but then she admits that Valentine's Day is a bit hard for her and thought that out of all of the people he would understand. Apparently her mom used to give her a stuffed bear every year, and it looks like this year she forgot to. He is able to relate to this, and so Gina confesses that there's just some things that she tells him that she doesn't tell anybody else. And then he agrees, saying that they do that for each other.
Yeah, no, I get that. Missing your mom.
I knew you would. Sorry, there's just some things that I tell you that I don't really tell anyone else.
Yeah, no, I think we do that for each other.
And I understand that they bonded over this previously, as like I said, it was one of the things that I liked most about their relationship. And I would really like this scene if it wasn't for the fact that he is now back together with Nini. Or that this is the first conversation that we've seen them have after Gina's confession. And I don't know, I just feel like them agreeing that they do have this shared connection while he's currently in a relationship with someone else just like doesn't sit right with me. Especially when they haven't taken the time to clarify where he stands, and it just makes me feel like he's leading her on when he has no actual real intentions with her. But anyways, he then gets a call from Nini, and so he makes a motion for her to hush, which she is unimpressed by, which like rightfully so in my opinion, particularly because she was in the middle of confiding in him about something. But we come to find out that Nini is still in the hospital with her mom, as the injury is more serious than they thought, and now she's not sure she'll get the chance to see him. And then to his credit, Ricky does explain the whole song situation to Gina afterwards, and so she tells him to call her back and play the song for her over the phone. He then goes to thank her for this idea, but she's already gone. And at this point, I do really feel for Gina. It's almost heartbreaking to watch her still care so much about this person, and honestly it just makes me feel like she deserves someone better than him right now. But then we move on to Gina's house, or Ashlyn's I should say, and we see that somebody has left her a box of chocolates. She then gets a text from Ricky thanking her for the advice, and then this causes her to think that the chocolates are from him. And so she sends him a text wishing him a happy Valentine's Day and says that the chocolates made her night. But then she gets a text from her mom who reveals that the chocolates are from her. So now Gina is in even more of an awkward situation. But back to our happy couple. So Ricky calls Nini and gets her voicemail, and so he decides to take Gina's advice and play her the song over her voicemail. Then we find out that Nini is on the phone as well, and she's doing the exact same thing. And then this results in a mashup of both of their songs. But now it is time for Nini to head back to Denver. So we see the couple sharing goodbyes over FaceTime, and Nini reveals that she's stolen his sweater from the early episodes of the first season. She also says that he doesn't have to put on a smile for her, that if he's having a hard time doing this long distance thing, then they can talk about it. But he ensures that he's smiling because he's happy for her and gets her to promise that they continue FaceTiming every day. So of course, all of this brings us to their next cast rehearsal. We find out through Gina's confessional that her and Ricky cleared up the whole chocolate situation, that she misinterpreted the whole thing and now it's a running joke between the two of them. That she says is really funny, although it doesn't really look like she means it. And I personally am not really too sure why we didn't get to see any of that happen. Maybe it's just because they weren't planned to be endgame at this point, but I personally am disappointed by that because I feel like I would have really liked to see that interaction. And then in a surprising turn of events, we see Nini interrupt their rehearsal. She says that she needs just one more group hug, and then we cut to Nini and Ricky on their own as he picks her up and spins her. He questions what she's still doing here, and so she kisses him, saying that she just had to give him that. Her driver then cancels on bringing her to the bus station, and so Ricky offers to drive her instead. But then Miss Jen comes in, and then she says that she'll drive her. And then in non-romantic news, there is this big snowstorm going on, and then this causes the power to go out and everyone gets stranded at school. Then while wandering the halls, Big Red stops Gina and asks her for advice on if Ricky should send this text to Nini or not. Ricky tries to stop him from sharing, but then Gina asks what the text is. And so Big Red says that he wants to tell her that he's happy that she's following her dreams, but at the same time he wishes that he was her dream instead. And he wants her to come back now and be with him forever. Gina is obviously saddened by this, but she plays it cool, saying that he should not text that to her or say that out loud ever. He then apologizes for sucking her into this, but she says that it's okay. And I'm like, honestly a bit surprised that Big Red is so in the dark as to what's gone on between the two of them. Like, if somebody confessed how they feel to me, like, you better believe my best friend would hear about it. But I understand that as far as the show's timeline is concerned, we're not exactly supposed to know about that yet. But still, even like putting that one thing aside, Big Red is still familiar with the rest of their history. So I really didn't like seeing him try to like stir the pot here. At the same time though, I was really happy that we finally got to hear how Ricky is actually feeling about this whole long distance situation. Moving on though, the roads then get cleared up, and so Ricky decides to go and meet Nini at the bus station. He runs to her and she asks if he's okay, but he ignores her question and instead asks if she brought her snow globe. She shows it to him, and so then he says that she has everything she needs.
You're still leaving.
You're still smiling. Are you okay? Is there something you're not saying?
Did you bring your snow globe?
Of course.
Well, then you got everything you need.
Last bus to Denver, now boarding. Last bus to Denver, now boarding.
And I get that Ricky is just trying to come up with an excuse as to why he's there because now he's chickening out with asking her to stay. But I honestly just can't get past the fact that this girl supposedly brought this snow globe home with her for 2 days. And then now she's bringing it back with her. I guess it's small, but like for her to just like pull this thing out of her pocket, like I just feel like it would have been way more believable if she like gifted her a stuffed bear or something. But anyways, they hug and then she walks off, but she does turn back and he smiles at her. But then none of this matters apparently because then Nini decides to come home anyways. She's realized that Yak is just not the right fit for her anymore and so it's time to come home. Meanwhile, we see Ricky call her and he tells her that he just wants to be honest with her. And the truth is that he misses her so much and wishes that she would come home and stay with him forever. And so then she asks where he is right now and then tells him to stay there, alluding to her going and surprising him and the two of them having a grand reunion. But again, we never actually see this happen, which is really weird for me. Like you'd think that the moment where she's decided to stay would be like a big moment for the two of them and that would be a moment that they would want to include in their show as the show is basically supposed to be about them. And I understand that it's because they're trying to make this whole thing be a part of their downfall, but at the same time, like it just doesn't make any sense to me because they included this scene. But now that Nini is back, Ricky has gotten it into his head that she now needs to be a part of their production. So while working on centerpieces for Carlos's upcoming birthday party, he says that it wouldn't hurt if they asked Miss Jen to get her back on stage with them. But Nini feels as though that wouldn't be fair because she didn't audition. And she also sees all of this as a sign for her to work on her own music. This concerns Ricky as he's worried as to when they'll get time to see one another if she's busy with her own solo thing and he's busy with the musical. But then Nini fails in validating any of his feelings towards this and says that they'll see each other all the time and that it's not that deep. Which I feel like was very harsh and also just felt like a complete change from Nini. Especially because she was previously very concerned about how he was feeling in regards to the whole long distance thing. For her to suddenly be like, actually your feelings don't matter to me now that I'm back, like was super weird to me. And they do kind of explain why she reacts like this later on, but I also just kind of feel like it comes out of nowhere. But either way, this is definitely not the end of this conflict. So this brings us to Carlos's birthday party where Ricky makes the poor decision of talking to Gina about this situation. He asks her if he should talk to Miss Jen about getting Nini involved in the production, and so she asks if that's what Nini wants and encourages him to make sure she's cool with it first. This is obviously not the answer that he wanted, and so he asks her to think hypothetically as to if she was the one he was dating. Which again, I feel like is a wild thing to say to somebody who confessed their feelings to you like not that long ago. Or even just to say that to somebody that you have history with, period. So she says that she'd be flattered like he suggested, but then as he's leaving, she stops him saying that they aren't. And that it might be better for him to confide in other people when it comes to problems that he's having with Nini.
But we aren't.
Sorry?
We aren't dating.
Obviously.
So maybe there are better people to confide in about Nini.
Yeah. No, I just...
No, it's fine. I know what you meant. I'm just saying tonight's about Carlos.
So I think if we went into this conversation unaware of the fact that she recently confessed her feelings to him, then maybe her reaction would come across as a bit harsh. But I think that the fact that we do know about that offers a lot of clarity, as it is now the second time that he's come to Gina about relationship advice with Nini, not including the ones that happened before they got back together again. And I'll accept that last time was more so Big Red's fault than his, but I still feel like at this point he should know better than to play with her feelings like this. And honestly, at this point, I'm just happy to see her stand up for herself. But back to Ricky. So even though all of the signs are pointing to no, he still decides to go to Miss Jen on Nini's behalf. And eventually, Miss Jen proposes that Nini play the part of the Rose in the musical, and that her and Ricky write a duet for their characters to perform together. This brings us to their next rehearsal, where she is given the role of writing this duet over the weekend, and this disappoints Ricky because it causes him to realize that his plan kind of failed, as now she might be in the musical, but they're not able to spend Saturdays together like they usually do now. Meanwhile, Nini has abandoned her task of writing a duet in favor of writing a solo number from the Rose's perspective. And she says that she did this because she was really struggling with viewing things from the Beast's perspective. But then when she switched things around, the words just came flooding out of her. Which is very telling, as the song is all about trying to define yourself independently of the relationship that you're in or were in. And so she of course asked Courtney not to tell Ricky about this. But then Carlos records her performing it and posts it on their Instagram anyways. In the following episode, Nini says that Ricky has been acting very supportive in regards to her song, and so then we see Big Red ask him how he actually feels about it. He pretends to be okay with it, saying that it's just a show tune that doesn't mean anything, but at the same time it's pretty obvious that that's not how he actually feels about it. Then we move on to the gang going undercover at North High, as this school is also putting on a production of Beauty and the Beast, and they believe that they have stolen Ricky's beast mask. And while there, Ricky gets approached by another girl named Lily. She kind of tries to get Ricky for herself by saying that she admires how cool he is about his girlfriend trying to stab him in the back with a song, which was definitely a harsh delivery, and I know that she's not speaking with good intentions, but at the same time it was so nice nice to finally hear someone actually call the song for what it is. But Ricky, of course, plays dumb and says that he loves the song. But she just questions him further and recites the lyrics and says that it sounds like it's coming from a girl who wants some space. And then says that if he's looking for someone who doesn't, then he should call her. Because that's one thing Ricky needs apparently, which is to get involved with another girl. But then all of this ends up pushing Ricky to his breaking point. So when Nini asks Ricky if it's just her that thinks all of this is insane, referring to their dance battle that they're about to have with North High, he says that she can always just take off if she wants nothing to do with this, and that he doesn't want her to feel confined. She is hurt by this, and so she decides to do just as he says and leaves. Now, I know that Ricky's delivery here is a little bit less than ideal, but at the same time, I really don't blame him for it because I just feel like she hasn't given him any sort of courtesy since moving back. And I understand that her song was published without her approval, and that he's also very guilty of some meddling and whatnot, but I still feel like she should have talked to Ricky about her song after it was put out there. Which I guess maybe she did, but I can't confirm as to whether or not that happened because they didn't show it to us. And I honestly just can't even imagine how hurtful it must have been for him to have to listen to that song and realize that that's how she's feeling about their relationship. So after their big dance-off, they come to find out that they can't actually alter the original text of Beauty and the Beast to include Nini's song. And then this causes Ricky to question if maybe the song didn't fit their production anyways. He says that it seemed a little heavy, and then this causes Nini to get upset once again. But again, I just feel like I'm on Ricky's side here. Like, the Rose having a solo number in the Beauty and the Beast is just weird. And it was definitely more so a song about her than her character or her prop. And I also feel like he delivered his opinion in a very calm and reasonable manner, and her responding to this by just leaving kind of irks me. But we later come to find out why she's really upset as she asks Ricky why he pretended to be happy and supportive of her song. And then she says that she knew that he would be upset about him not being in the song. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, what? Like, when has he made this be about him not being in it? Like, he hasn't. The issue is very much so more that you publicize to the world that you feel trapped in your relationship. So he basically says this and that he's relieved that she won't be performing it in front of the entire school. And then she, of course, does what she does best, which is brush him off again before leaving.
Why would you pretend to be supportive and happy about my song?
Yeah, I wasn't pretending, I was trying.
I knew it. I knew you were upset about not being in the song.
I don't care about being in the song. I'm just a little relieved that the whole school's not gonna hear my girlfriend singing about being kept under glass.
Just a song, Ricky.
A song can mean everything.
So I feel like I've been trying at least a little bit to give Nini the benefit of the doubt, that is, until now. Like, at this point, I just can't. Her lack of communication skills here is just astonishing to me. And I'm just like, if you don't want to be with your boyfriend right now, why don't you just break up with him? I feel like she is just stringing him along and not talking to him about any of her true feelings, and I'm just like, for what? Like, I honestly don't understand why she's suddenly feeling such aggression towards him. Somehow we went from I love you to I'm worried about you during this long distance thing to I don't know who I am independently of you and I feel like you're suffocating me. Which is just such a big jump to make, especially in comparison to where Nini's character was at the end of the first season. And I just feel like it's bad storytelling for them to not show us how she got to this point. Because otherwise it just looks like Ricky communicated to her twice that he wants to spend more time with her, which I feel like is a valid concern for a partner to have. And then she just completely changed on him and I don't understand how we got there. But we must continue on, and so then we see that Nini starts her own Instagram music account and she decides to call herself Nina on it instead of Nini. So just further distancing herself from her boyfriend, which again just feels like a weird thing for her to do while they're still currently in a relationship. The following Monday, Courtney asks her what Ricky thinks about this rebrand, and she says that they haven't talked much and so maybe he hasn't noticed, which I personally feel like is a bit of a baffling comment for her to make. Courtney then points out that he has noticed, motioning that he's behind her, and then she leaves the two of them alone. So he asks why she's not returning his texts, which I feel like makes her comment about the two of them not talking that much have even more weight to it. She says that she's had a crazy busy weekend, and so then he asks if that's because of her new music account. And he asks if she made it because of everything that he said about her keeping herself under glass. This, I guess, upsets her as she says that no offense, but this actually isn't about you. And first of all, if you have to preface something with saying no offense, odds are what you're about to say is going to be offensive. And also, how could she say it's not about him when it's absolutely about him? She's the one who wanted to find out who she was without him and then started a music account and removed the nickname that he gave to her. Like, yes, it might be a way for her to discover who she really is, but you can't deny that he's still at the root of it. So then he asks why the channel is called Nina, as that made it sound personal, but then she argues that it is personal as Nina is her given name. So it's pretty clear that she's just not going to be taking anything that he says seriously. And then she says that he should be happy about her trying to be her own person. And then she quickly changes topics, showing him a comment that she's received on her Instagram.
I'm just saying, when you make a point of changing your name on social media, it feels kind of personal.
It is personal. To me, Nina's my given name. Look, I'm being my own person, and that seems like something you could maybe be happy for me about.
So I think that my main problem with this is that everything that she's saying, or has been saying for the past like 3 episodes or so, just comes across as so charged and mean. She's just constantly saying such hurtful things to him and then brushing them off like they're no big deal. And it's just incredibly passive aggressive and frustrating to watch. Especially because I would agree with some of the things that she's saying if she wasn't saying them like an insult. And also if everything she was trying to do wasn't like at his expense. And I just feel like she's built this strong resentment to him in regards to holding her back, but I just don't really see how he's done that. But as I said, she shows him her Instagram comments and then he makes the mistake of deleting one after she's gone. It was basically like some guy asking her to collab and then he got like threatened by this. And while this definitely wasn't a cool move for him to make, he does regret doing so immediately. And it's like, I can also understand how he was pushed to that point after the way she's been treating him. And so now Ricky is stressing and he turns to Big Red, unsure if he should tell Nini about the comment that he deleted or not. And he's also unsure as to if he's supposed to refer to her now as Nini or Nina. He feels as though he doesn't want to make things worse, but he also feels like he doesn't want to keep things from her. But he decides to come clean, saying that she'll be mad at him at first but will ultimately forgive him. And I mainly just wanted to include this scene because I feel like it does a good job of presenting how much Nini has been messing with his mind here and it's just caused him so much stress, and it just makes me upset. So Ricky goes to her and he says that he wants to fix what's going on between the two of them. He says that they both want to make this work and they're both doing everything that they can. And this in particular I just feel like was such a telling line because it just truly shows that they are in a one-sided relationship, as they haven't been doing everything that they can to make this work. He has. If anything, she's been busy trying to tear them apart. But of course, Ricky is oblivious to this, and so he says that that's the reason why she came home. This causes Nini to say that she loved him and missed him, but he's not the reason why she came back. This confuses Ricky, as he was under the impression that she decided to come back after their phone call, and so then he asks if she tried to come back like in spite of him. Which I was surprised to hear that they didn't talk about this, especially because they alluded to her going to see him after she decided to come back. But again, I feel like this is just something else we can't really speak to in depth about because we didn't actually get to see it. So now he's upset at her lack of honesty, and she's upset about him asking her to give up her dreams for him. And I'm just like, finally, like we finally have some clarity as to why she's been treating him like absolute garbage ever since she got home. And what I don't understand is if this is what upset her to begin with, why didn't she just talk to him about it? Instead of being just so passive aggressive and dismissive towards him for the past like month or so. Anyways, Ricky says that he doesn't know what's going on with her and it's been freaking him out. And then this is when things kind of go off the rails. They both just go on to list things that the other person did wrong, and then it results in this like screaming match in the middle of the pizza joint.
I don't even know what's going on with you. And honestly, it's kind of freaking me out. First, you wait to the last second to tell me you're even leaving for Yak.
And then you went behind my back and asked Miss Jen to give me a part in the show, even though I told you I didn't want one.
And then you wrote that Rose song about us instead of just telling me how you're feeling.
And when my song got cut, it was like you didn't even care.
And then I found out you didn't even come home to be with me.
I was trying to do the right thing.
So was I.
And I'm not really too sure why that was necessary for them to give us like a bulleted list of everything that the other person did wrong. Like, we watched the show, we know what went down, we're caught up, you don't need to remind us. And I honestly feel like it was done as a way to minimize Nini's wrongdoings and highlight Ricky's as well. And don't get me wrong, he's definitely guilty in this situation too. But I feel like because of this being the direction that the conversation went into, then Ricky's comment about being freaked out by not knowing what's going on with her was kind of swept under the rug. When I feel like it shouldn't have been, because it kind of highlights the main problem that's currently going on in their relationship. And in the grand scheme of things, I definitely think that Nini is more the catalyst of this breakup than Ricky is. But speaking of their breakup, it is time for that. So Ricky meets Nini in her childhood treehouse and they joke about when they had their first kiss there as kids. Then she confesses that he actually was part of the reason why she came back home. But lately she's been feeling as though she liked how she had a whole new start there, as opposed to back home where it has always been Ricky and Nini. He admits that he's been trying to protect that because it feels safe, and she admits that that's exactly it and that she doesn't want to feel safe, which kind of came across as a bit weird to me, but to each their own. He then confesses that he deleted a comment on her Instagram and she says that that wasn't okay, and he agrees to this and apologizes. He says that he's been trying to do everything that he can to make this work because he loves her so much, but that he doesn't like who he's becoming by having to chase her down all the time, and she admits that she doesn't like running away. And honestly, I really sympathized with him when he said this. Like, I honestly can't even imagine all that she's put him through in these past 2 seasons with how hard he's been trying to get her back. So she says that they've been out of sync ever since she got back, which I found to be interesting because I'm just like, whose fault is that again? I'll give you a hint, it's not the name that rhymes with Mickey. So she says that they've been out of sync ever since she got back and suggests that they both take some time to figure things out. He then reminds her of the last time that they took a break, which resulted in them breaking up, and then she asks him if that's what's happening now. He just says that he doesn't want to hold her back, and she says that she feels the same way and then asks to hold him. So then they hug and he says that he's got her as she cries.
Last time we took a break, we ended up broken up.
Are we breaking up?
I don't want to hold you back.
I don't want to hold you back either. Can I just hold you now?
Now, I feel like if I wasn't so annoyed by these two at this point, then this scene would have really gotten me because it is just such an emotionally charged moment. And it is still good. I mean, they're both just such incredible actors. And him telling her that he's got her at the end there was just so sweet. So post-breakup, I would say that Nini is doing a lot better than Ricky is, which makes sense considering she's kind of more the one that wanted this breakup to begin with. But it's now spring break and we see Ricky visiting his mom, and we see him in bed sulking about the breakup as he feels as though it's all his fault. Yet he still can't figure out where he went wrong. Which honestly just broke my heart once again, and it made me want to like jump through the screen and tell him that he did absolutely nothing wrong. This has got to be like the most it's not you, it's me situation that I have ever seen. Like, yes, he talked to Miss Jen when he shouldn't have, and yes, he deleted a comment on her Instagram, but I feel like both of those things really aren't the reason as to why they broke up. You could argue that him telling her to come home was, but I honestly don't think that that was it either. I feel like as her boyfriend, he should have been allowed to communicate with her that he actually wanted her home with him without that backfiring in his face. Anyways, this causes his mom to suggest that he try to make something to help him move on. And so of course he decides to write a song. And then we don't hear about this song again until after spring break, when he tells Carlos that he was going to play it for her but doesn't feel as though she needs to hear it anymore. And that it's been a long time since Nini looked at him the way that Carlos's boyfriend looks at him. Which I think is honestly a very telling statement, and it made me a bit sad to hear. But now that that roller coaster is over, let's move on to a much happier couple that has basically been getting together during all of this drama. And you might have been wondering where Gina has been this whole time, and so this is your answer to that. And so let's move on to chapter 3, where we get more acquainted with EJ and Gina. So now we have to go back to episode 5 of this season, which is when things for this couple truly began. So if you'll recall, Carlos was having a birthday party, and while at this party, EJ was making a birthday video for him. And one of the things that he was doing was interviewing all of the guests. So Gina goes and performs her song for Carlos and then sits down to do her interview. EJ compliments her performance and says that she's glowing. He then asks her how she's doing and they share a bit of a moment. He then goes to hit record and Gina is in shock that he was just genuinely asking her how she was.
Well, you're glowing. Remind me to hire you to throw me a birthday party.
That's sweet. So should I give a final shout out to Carlos, or?
Yeah, let me hit record here.
That was just you asking how I was feeling?
Is that okay?
And now, honestly, I just love this. I feel like this is exactly what Gina deserves. Somebody who actually cares about her and isn't just stringing her along as a second choice. I absolutely love this moment, and it just gets me so excited for what's to come for the couple. We also get another moment in this episode when EJ gets caught looking at Gina from afar. Then during their next rehearsal, they are all ordered to pair up. Ricky asks Gina to be his partner, but then she turns away from him in response. And then EJ comes up to her instead, and she agrees. And then we have some reveals through acting exercises. So Ashlyn asks Gina what her heart is telling her, and she looks over at Ricky saying that she's not too sure. Then during an exercise the following day, EJ says that he would ask Gaston if he ever learned to love after Belle. So just some subtle moments, but I feel like it hints at there being some change in store for these characters. Later we find out that the two of them have joined forces to become co-hosts for the East High morning show, which I guess isn't really that relevant in the grand scheme of things, but it's just so iconic that I couldn't not mention it. Then we get to when the gang was undercover at North High, and while there, Gina gets hit on by a student, and so EJ steps in pretending to be her boyfriend. While in character, he asks her if they're still on for risotto later, and she jokes that she would never miss risotto night.
Hey, babe.
Babe! I'm so glad you're here.
So, are we still on for risotto later?
You know, I would never miss risotto night.
And that's my cue.
Now, if I wasn't already pretty much sold on these two, I definitely would be after this moment, as I am honestly just a simple girl who loves a fake dating scenario. This is also the start of an ongoing joke involving the two of them and having risotto, which we will definitely see a lot more of. So after the guy leaves, she asks what he's doing, and he says that he felt bad that she was left alone on lookout duty. She finds this sweet, and then he jokes with her that fake boyfriends tend to be that way. Then later, as they're leaving the school, EJ says that he guesses they're not boyfriend and girlfriend anymore, and Gina agrees, saying that they're just going back to being being co-hosts instead, which was honestly just a very sweet and flirtatious moment, I felt like. Their flirtation continues in class the following Monday, and EJ says that they've gotten closer ever since they pretended to be a couple. But he then says that it was just pretend as they're only friends. But that is, of course, unless she said something different. She then accidentally comes in during his confessional and then leaves, which I just thought was absolutely adorable.
Yeah, Gina and I have gotten a little bit closer since North High when we were pretending to be together. But, no, that was just pretend. We're friends. Why, did she say something?
This is something that I don't think we ever saw again on the show, that is someone coming in and interrupting someone else's confessional, but I honestly loved it and I felt like it was a really neat way of showing their newness of their relationship. So amongst all of this, EJ has kind of been battling with his own identity, as he didn't get into Duke, which is the school that all of his family members before him went to. So during this episode, EJ's dad comes into their class as a guest speaker, and then he gives EJ a Duke sweater and tells him that he made some calls and got him in. Afterwards, Gina congratulates him on this, but he doesn't seem too happy about it. After school, he decides to go to Ashland's to talk about this, but then is met with Gina instead. So he confesses to her that he feels as though he didn't really get in, and that he only did get in because his dad made it happen. He feels as though his entire life has been mapped out for him, and she isn't really able to relate to this as she feels like her life has been the opposite. And I have to say, I do really like how this is basically the polar opposite of her connection with Ricky. I like that she's not just now bonding with someone else over their similar unstable home lives, but instead they're both able to offer different perspectives for one another. So he says that she always seems to know what she wants, and so then she asks him what he wants. He says that he doesn't know, and so she has him close his eyes and think about what his life looks like. But unfortunately, he's only able to see the negatives and goes on to list all of the bad things that he's done. And so this prompts her to say that she sees a guy who bought her a plane ticket back to East High, whose birthday video for Carlos made everybody cry, and who tries really hard to do the right thing and fails but keeps on trying. She insists that he's a good guy, and maybe if he forgave himself a little, he would end up seeing what she, or the rest of the world, sees.
EJ, you are a really good guy. Maybe if you just forgave yourself a little, you'd see what the rest of us see. And maybe then you'd recover from all your exhausting good fortune.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, I absolutely love this scene once again. I love her little slip up where she accidentally reveals that she's speaking from her own perspective. And it's honestly really nice to see EJ be with somebody who knows what he's worth and is able to see how hard he tries to be a good person. And it honestly just makes me excited to think about EJ being with somebody who he's going to do right by this time, or at least would have done right by if they didn't go ahead and ruin them, but we'll save that rant for later. So then EJ turns the focus on her and says that he sees the bravest person that he knows. And then the two of them share a moment before getting interrupted by Ashland coming home. Later that night, we see Gina fall asleep while the two of them are watching TV together, and before he leaves, he lays his Duke sweatshirt over top of her and then turns out the light. Which I didn't even notice the first time that I watched this. I don't know how I missed it, but I did. It wasn't until I was up late one night watching EJ and Gina edits that I was like, wait a second, I think that I missed something here. And I was so glad that I was informed of this because it does explain why she has his sweater later on, which I was low-key confused about. And also just like, oh my god, what a sweet moment. I absolutely love these two, and they just deserved so much better. But anyways, now we have caught up to spring break, and we see Gina get stuck at the airport while trying to catch a plane to visit her mom. She then gets a call from EJ, who asks her what color he should let Ashland paint his nails. And she kind of gets a bit giddy after this call. She feels as though things have been a little bit different between the two of them and doesn't really know what's going on, and blames what happened with her and Ricky for her now not knowing the difference between someone being nice and someone flirting with her. Which honestly just makes me sad that she feels as though everything that happened with Ricky could have been just him being nice. Like, that just breaks my heart. And then in a surprising twist, Andy Mack's boyfriend shows up. The two of them then go on to share a moment as Sophia Wiley, who plays Gina, also appeared on Andy Mack. Or not appeared, she was like a main character. I don't know why I said appeared. And then the two of them oddly have their own connection, but then EJ gets thrown in there as well. It's revealed that Gina is wearing his Duke sweater, and then Jonah, I know that that's not his name here, but I couldn't be bothered to learn it, he asks her if that's her boyfriend's. And then she says, not that I know of. They also talk about her having her first kiss, and she alludes to being ready to have it, or at least getting there with EJ. Gina then posts on her story that her flight was canceled and that she has to take an Uber home. But her plans then change when EJ shows up to take her back instead. He also brings her a granola bar, which is just like top tier mind-reading energy, as she was earlier sad about forgetting one.
Excuse me, have you seen a Duke sweatshirt anywhere?
What are you doing at the airport?
Gotta show it for your peeps, you know?
Yeah.
Bring you back in the morning? Oh, also, I brought you a granola bar, in case you were hungry.
Now I know that it's short, but this scene is just very special to me. I feel like it shows how well EJ knows her already. I mean, him just coming all the way to the airport to take her home and then also offering to bring her back again the next day was just so amazing. And it's honestly just so nice to see her finally be with someone who is appreciating her and treating her the way that she should be treated. Then we have a little time jump as everybody comes back from spring break, and all of the girls as well as all of the guys get together to figure out how they're going to do the big beast transformation scene. And this is when we see Nini and Ashlyn question Gina about her and EJ. So she says that he was really sweet to her over spring break and basically saved her, but she still feels as though there's nothing romantic in the cards for them. And this being due to the fact that she feels as though she's been wrong before. Ashlyn is quick to realize that she's referring to Ricky and then brings up the chocolate situation. This causes Nini to ask what she's referring to, and then Gina explains what happened. But this time, of course, using friend terminology to downplay the situation, that he only brought her chocolates as a friend, but he didn't anyway, so it doesn't matter. So Nini asks why she didn't hear about this situation until now, and Gina plays it off like it wasn't a big deal. Then we find out what's holding EJ back as we get a look into the guys' conversation as well. So Carlos teases EJ about Gina, and I feel like I should add that Ricky was very caught off guard by this, which kind of made me mad. Like, he can't expect people to not move on with their lives after he already very clearly made his choice. Anyways, EJ says that they're not a thing, that she is the best, but that they're just friends. He then admits that he's not exactly ready to put himself out there yet after all that happened with Nini. And I find it kind of funny that both EJ and Gina are just two characters that have just been really jaded by our lead characters. And now they're both scared of starting something new because of similar reasons. But EJ says that the only thing that he's proud of in regards to his time with Nini was letting her go. This causes Carlos to ask if that means that he's going to let Gina go without even trying, which is just such a powerful line, and we find out later that this does resonate with him. So once everyone gets back at school, EJ asks Gina how the slumber party is going. She says that it's fun and then goes to leave, and then he stops her, asking her out for risotto. She is unsure at first, asking if Ashlyn put him up to this, but he says that she didn't, and so she says yes. And then they go on to stare at each other for longer than necessary, and it's a very sweet moment.
Do you want to get risotto with me sometime? For real this time?
Did Ashlyn put you up to this?
Not that I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, risotto sounds great.
Now, I think based off of my previous reactions in regards to everything related to this couple, I think it should be no surprise that I find this scene really adorable as well. And I love the nervous, awkward energy that they both have in this moment, as it just reminds me of like the early innocence of relationships. But now it's time for our big performance of Beauty and the Beast. We start the night off with the reveal that EJ and Gina are planning on having their risotto date after the show. In the confessional, EJ refuses to call it a date, but says that it's going to be quote-unquote good, clean fun with someone he digs. Gina, on the other hand, is a lot more comfortable with the terminology and asks what you wear on a date. Then Lily makes her return. Remember her? Yeah, me neither. But she asks Ricky out as well, and he says that he doesn't think that that would go over well with his friends. And then they both go on to bond a little bit over their parents' dating lives. We also see him contemplate to Big Red later on about her maybe not being as mean as they all thought that she was. And it was kind of wild to me that he would contemplate this to Big Red specifically when he was the one that she made fun of, which got her the label of being mean to begin with. But back to Gina. So she finds out that her mom actually isn't going to be making their performance, but she sends her brother instead, who is Jordan Fisher apparently, which I completely forgot about but was very pleasantly surprised by. And again, I'm sure that his character was given a name, but I will only be referring to him as Jordan Fisher. I hope you guys can understand. So later we see Jordan introduce himself to EJ, and he says that he's glad that Gina has a big brother figure in her life like him. So big yikes. EJ asks if that's what Gina said about him, and Jordan doesn't exactly answer this question, causing EJ to jump to his own conclusions. So now EJ is crushed, but I do think that it is important to mention that Jordan does make a point of bringing up their mom. And she basically sings EJ's praises, which I find interesting, especially in comparison to some events that happen in the 4th season, in regards to Gina not telling her mom about something or her not being supportive about something, but that's all I'll say on that. So then we have some hints to what I believe is Nini and Ricky still being endgame at this time. Basically, the crew is unable to find Ricky's harness for the big beast transformation scene, and so then Nini takes charge, telling him to do what they did in rehearsal. This causes Ricky to panic as he never got it right in rehearsal, but she says that there's a first time for everything and that she will catch the mask. Afterwards, we see Ricky and Nini exchange their opening night good luck notes, and earlier they both lied about them being fully written when they weren't. And then now they basically write the exact same thing on both of their cards, saying that they know that it's been a long road, but they wouldn't change that for anything. They agree that it's crazy how on the same page they are, and Nini says just for a moment, which is a callback to their duet from the 1st season of the same name.
Here's to second acts.
And new beginnings. Love, Nini.
It's pretty crazy.
I guess we are literally on the same page.
Just for a moment.
Now, I felt like I had to include this because it's basically the last we see of them, which is unfortunate because in my mind, these two are like the main ship from the show. I know they tried to change the narrative of that in the next 2 seasons, but in my mind, no other Ricky ships really tops these two as far as I'm concerned. But on to our other ship that hasn't sunk quite yet. So Gina goes to EJ post-show excited for their date, but then he suggests that they go to pizza with the rest of the cast instead. So obviously he's acting on the information that he received from Jordan here. She asks if this means that they have to reschedule once again, but then he says that they'll just play it by ear. So basically canceling on her for good. So she pretends not to be absolutely crushed by this and says that she'll meet him there. She then turns away and he drops his facade, looking upset as well.
Man, does this mean we gotta reschedule one more time?
We could, or we could just play it by ear, you know?
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been fun. I just feel like...
No, yeah, this is perfect. I'm just gonna grab my... I'll see you there then.
So this made me sad, but I was very happy that this conflict gets wrapped up quite quickly, otherwise I would be even more so upset with EJ over this. Moving on, Nini then finds Gina backstage crying, which honestly just breaks my heart, but she confides in her about EJ canceling on her. This causes Nini to give her a little speech about her powerful energy and how great she is, and Gina also apologizes to her properly about the whole chocolate situation. And honestly, this scene was really unexpected to me, but I'm really happy that they included it. It was so refreshing in comparison to shows often pitting girls against one another, and I just love seeing how far they've come. Moving on to the pizza place and also our final moments of the season. Ashlyn goes to Gina to apologize, and she says that if she knew that she only saw him as a brother, then she would have given EJ some very different advice. Obviously, Gina is shocked by this and immediately asks for some clarification. And then once she gets it, she does not waste time in running after EJ, who was leaving. She clarifies that he got some wrong information and then asks if he'll be her first kiss. He then smiles at her before they both run to one another.
EJ! You got bad intel.
What?
Can
Can you what?
I kiss you? Will you be my first kiss?
So obviously we do not see their first kiss. I feel like I've heard people say before that this was due to the fact that Sophia wasn't of age at this time, and if that is the case, I absolutely respect them for that. Nonetheless, I do still really like this moment and I feel like it's really cute despite the slight cringiness, but that could just be me. And with that, we wrap up season 2, which like I said, many call the worst season of the show, which I do think I would agree with if it wasn't for EJ and Gina. And honestly, I feel like there's parts of this season that I enjoy even more than the third, which is just, I know, shocking, but honestly, I don't even really like season 3 that much. They ruin EJ and Gina, obviously, and so seeing them not get their deserved storyline kind of broke me. And I also just didn't really understand why it was so Camp Rock heavy. Like, I understand that they're at summer camp, but at the same time, this is a High School Musical spinoff and not a Camp Rock spinoff. And so it just felt a little bit out of place for me personally, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself once again, and so let's jump right in to season 3. So as I'm sure you could gather, season 3 takes place the summer before their next school year at East High. And the cast that has stuck around is now headed off to theater camp, the same theater camp that EJ and Nini met at the year prior. So we begin with EJ and Gina being in love and headed off to camp, and Gina says that she's excited to have her first camp experience along with her first boyfriend. We also see them share their first kiss once they get there as EJ gives them a layout of the land.
Boys bunk, girls bunk, mountains.
Ocean, and sometimes there's bears.
Got it.
Okay, I will see you all tonight.
For the big announcement. One more thing.
So that was very cute, but also a little bit lackluster for that being their first kiss that we've actually seen on the show, which is honestly just foreshadowing, I feel like, for what's to come. Meanwhile, Ricky, on the other hand, hasn't really been having the best time back home. He has discovered that the girl he's seeing, Lily, is the one who actually stole their beast harness. And so he decides to ditch her and join his friends at camp. And now I know that this is probably a very unpopular opinion, but I personally feel like if they would have given Lily like a good redemption arc and made her more of a likable character, then I actually would have been down for these two being a thing. It just would have been way way more unexpected, and I just personally root more for the ships that I don't see coming. But back at camp, we come to find out that their production for this summer is going to be Frozen, which is quite the jump from The Music Man, which they did the previous year, but I digress. Corbin Bleu is also involved in this because he is directing a docu-series for Disney Plus about their production of Frozen. We then come to find out that EJ has been tasked with directing the musical, and he's kind of started to panic under the pressure as this is something that he's never done before. Gina tries to reassure him that he's going to do great, but she admits in the confessional that she was hoping that they would get to play the romantic leads together in the show and that she is a little bit disappointed by his role as director. And honestly, it's this new role as well as some other conflicts that develop along the way that ultimately end up being the demise of this couple. So although we do have some cute moments sprinkled in there, I feel like now is the best time for us to move on to chapter 4. So now is when they decide to bring Ricky back into the picture, which felt a little bit odd to me as I personally feel like he hasn't really been in the picture since like early season 2. And even then, he wasn't exactly interested. Nonetheless, we see the two of them run into each other and are unsure if they should hug or fist bump. Gina then asks to start over, and then we see Ricky do this weird rewind thing before she clarifies what she means.
Can we just start over?
Yes, definitely. Twinsies.
No, Ricky, that's what I was trying to say. Can the two of us start over?
Duh. Right.
So she explains to him that she wants them to have a fresh start with no drama and no chocolates. And honestly, at this point, I'm just like, why are we beating this chocolate thing into the ground? I am so sick of it being brought up. I feel like it keeps getting brought up and I don't understand why. But anyways, she says that this summer is supposed to be fun and he agrees. And I just want to say now, if you are a Ricky and Gina shipper and you're a bit discouraged about my ability to cover them, just please hang with me until the 4th season. As I've mentioned numerous times that I do enjoy that season, just like for right now, hang with me while I mourn my sinking ship. But back to the show. So since this series doesn't know how to do anything outside of love triangles, they then decide to add another girl into the picture. So then we meet Val, who is played by Meg Donnelly. EJ and Val are friends from previous summers, and their friendship kind of starts to intimidate Gina. So we see her and EJ hug, and Gina doesn't react well to this. And she also makes a comment after their auditions where she tells him not to worry because he has Val to help him through this. Although she doesn't exactly seem happy about that fact. This then causes her to say that she doesn't want to add something else to his plate and that they can just play it cool this summer if he wants. He insists that they're the only thing that he's not worried about, but agrees that it wouldn't be a bad idea if they kept it professional in rehearsals. And then we see the two of them joke about no more meaningful eye contact during that time. We then get another sweet moment between the couple the following day, after Gina gets the part of Anna and we see EJ come by to give her flowers.
Oh.
Sorry to barge in.
Love is an open door.
I knew you'd get the lead. You're a star.
Thank you. That means a lot.
And this is one thing that is nice about this season, which is that even though they are completely destroying my ship, at least we do have a few moments like this one that are really sweet. So Gina then goes on about her role, and then EJ kind of zones out a little bit, revealing that he's still stressed, which is honestly like his theme this season. Which kind of broke my heart a little bit. Like I just wanted somebody to help the guy out, but I just felt like throughout this entire season, nobody was taking any of his concerns seriously. And speaking of nobody taking him seriously, we then see this happen again that night. So they're all out in the woods for this camp tradition, and Ricky ends up wandering off and finding this spooky shrine. He wants to show it to EJ, and Gina wants to go along with them as well, but then this just results in EJ snapping at the both of them about having way too much on his plate to have time to go and run around with them. And so of course, Ricky and Gina end up going alone together instead. While on their adventure, she teases him about being scared, and there's this one moment where he gets her to feel his heart racing.
It's quiet.
Yeah, maybe a little too quiet.
Oh, don't tell me you're scared.
You wish.
Honestly, yeah. It would make me feel a little bit less like a baby. Check this out. Hearts racing.
Chicken?
Now, despite this excursion being mentioned a few times after this, I honestly feel like that was really the only questionable moment. I guess besides one later where he says that he's proud of her for getting the role of Anna, but honestly that whole interaction felt pretty innocent to me. At the end of the night, they both agree that they had a good time even though they didn't get to find the shrine, and they go on to joke about how awkward they are together. The following day, we find out that EJ isn't too happy about the two of them spending alone time together, as he sarcastically tells Gina to ask her late night hiking buddy something instead of him. But we quickly come to see that this couple is going going to have much bigger problems than Ricky. Later that day, Gina excitedly tells him that her mom is moving back and is going to be renting a place right down the street from him. EJ pretends to be excited about this and hugs her, but then he reveals in the confessional that his dad actually sent him a letter and he's not happy with him taking a gap year. He instead wants to send him to this training school in St. Louis. That being said, EJ is planning on getting out of this by proving to his dad that he can be successful without going to that school. And he says that he's going to tell Gina all about this once he figures his way out of it. So she excitedly goes on about all the time they're going to get to spend together in Salt Lake, and he stress rambles about how they'll definitely be seeing each other all the time.
I've been kicking myself for not going exploring with you and Ricky last night. And I know I've been distracted with the show.
It's okay. It would have been more fun with you. But hey, it's not like we only have this summer now, right? We can go on adventures all the time back in Salt Lake, too.
Definitely. Definitely we'll be seeing each other all of the time because of geography.
So definitely not the best plan from EJ there. And I am a little bit disappointed that after all he's been through in these past 2 seasons, that he still decides to keep this a secret from her. Because this would have been a great opportunity for him to demonstrate his growth if he would have just told Gina about this whole situation with his dad. But of course, they wouldn't do that because why would they show growth towards a ship that they're planning on ruining? But back to rehearsals. So EJ suggests that they do Love is an Open Door, which causes Gina to freak out about him using the L word and saying that she didn't hate the sound of it. Unfortunately, but also not that unfortunately, because it results in some great drama. The actor who plays Hans isn't present at the moment, and so Ricky offers to take his place instead. This causes EJ to retort that he stay in his lane. And so we're already getting some great tension between these two boys, which I would be lying if I didn't say that I enjoyed. Corbin then chooses EJ to perform the song with Gina, and they start off a bit stiff. That is until they look at each other, and then we burst into a full-on musical number. Afterwards, Corbin asks Ricky if they were good, and he rambles about everybody being amazing before leaving. So I think it's safe to say that he has caught the love bug for Gina once again, or you could argue that it never left. Afterwards, Gina finds Ricky running lines and sees him pull out his bucket list. She then snatches it from him and teases him about it, and then he tries to get it back, which obviously results in a very flirtatious moment, which I feel like I should be mad about, but I also didn't really see it as being intentional. But speaking of this bucket list, it is also kind of an important plot point, so remember this one. Ricky has this bucket list of things that he wants to complete before he's 17, and his birthday is at the end of the season. And so he wants to do all of these things on this list before camp is over. Unfortunately, though, EJ does end up seeing this moment. Or maybe, I guess not so, unfortunately, because if your girlfriend does have unresolved feelings for her ex-situationship, then it's good for him to know about it. But he sees all of this and is sad, and so he goes and talks to Val. He then ends up confiding in her about the situation with his dad, and she encourages him to talk to his girlfriend about this whole thing instead. But he's still salty about what he saw, and so he says that he would if she wasn't so busy with someone else. But as I said earlier, EJ still has bigger problems than her and Ricky. Particularly the fact that he's apparently keeping secrets from her now. And we see this catch up to him that night while they're all watching Camp Rock for their movie night. Gina says that she could never lie like Mitchie does in the movie, and EJ defends her character by saying that she's not lying, she's just not telling the whole truth, which Gina says is also known as lying and that she doesn't do well with liars. This causes the guilt in EJ to escalate, and he decides to tell her about the letter after the movie. But then of course, as he goes to do this, Gina ends up finding the letter on her own. She then questions Val, asking if she knew about this. And again, I honestly don't think that any of this would have escalated like it does if Gina would have just gotten the chance to hear it from EJ like he had planned. And in a perfect world where they weren't actively trying to tear my favorite ship apart, maybe that is what would have happened. Or maybe not, because at the end of the day, I do understand that this series is a drama, and so they gotta get that drama from somewhere. Now, like I mentioned, amongst all of this, Ricky has started to battle with his own feelings for Gina. So back at movie night, we see him observe this conversation between the two of them, and this apparently affected him so much that he had to leave the movie altogether. Back at his cabin, we see him find one of our new characters, which is Jet, and he is playing the role of Hans, and if you'll recall, he was absent from the rehearsal earlier. So Ricky turns his attention on him and gets mad at him for abandoning Gina when she needed him, which is a little bit hypocritical in regards to the events from the last season, if you ask me. So maybe there's some guilt involved there, I don't know. Anyways, Jet turns the situation back on him, asking if this is really about him and Gina. But Ricky gets slightly offended by this, saying that Gina is just a friend. Meanwhile, the reality show has requested more drama from the cast, otherwise their series will be cancelled. So then the kids do not waste time in creating some characters for everybody to play up for the camera. Most notably, Ricky is cast as the jilted ex, and then Gina is the one with the catchphrase, which is "don't get me started." They also decide that somebody has to hit somebody and a secret has to get revealed by the end of the day. This leads to Ricky and EJ practicing their fake slapping. Carlos prompts EJ by saying that he's stolen the woman that Ricky loves. Ricky asks if he means Gina, saying that she's EJ's girlfriend and so he stole her or would have stolen her in this fake scenario. Which, if that's actually what this boy thinks, then he needs a reality check big time. Like, she would have actually needed to be his to begin with for EJ to steal her. But EJ goes along with this, saying that he's held a torch for her for years, which not true. And in this fake scenario, he even pretends to get lost with her in the woods, and now it's weird because she's in love with him. And then Ricky cuts him off with a fake slap to the face.
EJ, you've stolen the woman Ricky loves.
You mean Gina? Because she's EJ's girlfriend, so he stole her. Or would have stolen her in the fake scenario.
Yeah, I like it. You've held a torch for her for years. Sometimes in this fake scenario, you even pretend to get lost with her in the woods, and then now it's weird because, like, she's in love with me. You're at camp.
Now, don't get me wrong, I do love this moment, and I remember people raving about it when it first premiered, and I can definitely see why. As I just cannot deny that I do love the drama as well. But I do feel like this scene is a little bit out of touch and kind of comes across like they're trying to rewrite history, which is honestly something that I feel like these next 2 seasons just love to do. But back to rehearsals, as we have now reached the final song of the day, which is the number between Anna and Kristoff. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but Ricky has been cast as Kristoff. So Carlos encourages them beforehand and reminds Ricky that his reality TV persona has unresolved feelings for Gina. And of course, he's hitting a little bit closer to home with that comment than he probably intended to. He then tells Gina that she's angry with her boyfriend and is trying to use her ex-boyfriend to make him jealous, which is a little less accurate. I don't think Gina would ever use somebody else for her own personal gain, and that would also require her to not have any feelings left for Ricky, which I also don't think is the case. Anyways, Carlos tells her to have fun torturing EJ, and her mood shifts from his previous comment saying that she can do that. They're then told by Val and EJ to just run the song half energy for marking, but of course they then go on to do the opposite, giving the song their all and even sharing a moment at the end. Afterwards, EJ goes to Gina and he asks if she's mad at him, and she uses her catchphrase in response. EJ then promises that they'll have time to hang once the reality show situation gets sorted out, but she questions if that's really true, as she's starting to feel like they're having 2 very different summers. He ensures that tomorrow is going to be better, but she still doesn't seem to believe him. And this honestly just made me sad because I don't even think that all of this is necessarily EJ's fault. Like, obviously him keeping secrets from her is, but all of this like other stuff is just him being genuinely stressed and overwhelmed. And I kind of wish that Gina could have been more supportive in that regard. But moving on, this leads to Gina confiding in Ricky about this. He comes to her and apologizes for things being a little too intense back there, and she admits that it's her, not him, and that she wasn't expecting her summer of first to include her first fight with her boyfriend, or her first like boyfriend one-sided secret. Ricky relates to this, saying that it's hard not to say how you feel, and then the 2 of them share a look before getting interrupted.
I just didn't think my summer of first would include my first boyfriend fight. No, it's not even a fight. It's like a one-sided confusion. First boyfriend secret, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's really hard not to just say what you feel, you know?
And now at this point, I'm just mad because I do really want to like these 2. Like, I'm trying, like, and I did. Season 1, Ricky and Gina, I was all about. And like I've mentioned, I do come around in season 4. But there's just something missing for me here in this season. And I think it mainly comes down to the fact that it just feels so out of touch in comparison to the season that we just came off of. But we must continue on. And so Gina then turns around and does something that really disappointed me. During a cast photo, EJ tells them to smile and says that they're almost home. And then she asks in front of everybody if by home he means Salt Lake or St. Louis. She then asks if he's confused and says, "Welcome to the club."
All right, smile, guys. We're almost home.
Almost home as in Salt Lake or St. Louis?
Wait, what?
Oh, are you confused? Welcome to the club.
So I understand that Gina is hurt and everything, but I really don't think that this was the right way to go about it. And then I'm also just kind of confused because we literally just saw them talk like 5 seconds ago, and so I don't understand why she didn't just bring all of this up then. It almost feels like vindictive of her to like air their problems out in front of everybody, and maybe it was. But I just personally feel like her character has come so far since the first season, and I'm surprised to see her do something like this. But to give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she was just trying to play up drama for the camera, although I highly doubt that that's the case. So EJ tells Gina that it's not what it looks like, that his dad is trying to get him to go to this school, but he's going to change his mind. And he plans on doing so by making sure that this documentary series is a success. But she's upset that he let her go on thinking that they were going to be neighbors and doesn't understand why she didn't just tell him all of this. He then gets called by his full name and she laughs at that being another thing that she didn't know about. She then leaves, saying that he acted like an old version of himself, or suggests that maybe this is the real version.
Gina, please,
You just acted like an old version of yourself, I get it. Or maybe it's just the real EJ of Shallow Lake.
Now that last line in particular is what really got me, because it really just brought me back to that coach scene from season 2, where she was describing the type of person that she saw him as. And so for her to no longer feel that way just makes me sad. And even if this was just a heat of the moment type of situation, I still feel like the fact that she even said that at all was just so heartbreaking. And I can't even imagine what it was like for EJ to hear that from the person that was previously his biggest advocate. But before we get back to our deteriorating ship, we do have a confession from Ricky. So he tells Carlos that he actually wasn't acting today, and that he does still have feelings for Gina. He asks him not to tell anyone, but then they come to realize that they're being filmed through the bushes. Kind of like me on the set of Zombies 3, which for legal reasons I feel like I have to add that that's a joke and that I didn't actually film anything. And for those of you who are confused, you can go watch my Zombies 3 review. But I mean, this was just like a tell me something I don't know moment. Although I did like the confession, I feel like that was done well. The following day, EJ asks Gina if they can start over, and I guess that this was just because we still have a couple more episodes before they want them to break up. And at this point, part of me was just like, can't we just rip the band-aid off? Like, I know that they're about to end, so I just personally feel like I'd rather it be sooner than later. Like, stop stringing me along, you know? And then maybe I'd be more on board with Ricky and Gina if we actually got a couple moments between them before they got together that didn't happen while she was with somebody else. But back to their conversation. So EJ says that he's making big steps to ensure that their production is perfect, and she counters that it's not about that. But he feels as though a perfect show is how he stays in Salt Lake with her, and so it is about that. And he says this to her as he grabs her hand and they share a look. Now, despite this being a very sweet moment, I'm honestly a little bit surprised that they're both still trying to make this work, and that he doesn't care at all about what she said to him during their last argument. I mean, maybe I'm overreacting because I do understand that a lot of people say things during fights that they don't exactly mean, but at the same time, like, she really cut deep with that one, and I feel like they should have brought that up again. But on to our plot of the day, which is the color war, which is basically like their camp group activity day. So Gina asks that they not talk about the future and just focus on making today amazing. She expresses that she just wants them to have a win today, and so he says that he'll ensure that they're on the same team. She admits that she likes that plan, and then the two of them lean in for a kiss.
Honestly, I just want us to win today.
That'll make sure we're on the same team.
I like that plan.
And again, this is a sweet moment and I do really like it. I just hate the fact that it's clouded by all of the conflicts that are currently going on between them as well. And then, as I'm sure nobody expected, their day does not end up going as planned. During their big basketball game, EJ is busy with Miss Jen, who has come to help him out as a director. And then this disappoints Gina, as she was really looking forward to spending the day with him. She then makes the winning shot for her team and her and Ricky hug. And I feel like I should add that this moment was really important to her, as she mentioned earlier that she's never really been good at sports. So this is especially something that she really would have wanted EJ to be there for. And we see this later when he asks her about it and she tells him that he just had to be there. But despite being disappointed, Gina has still decided not to give up on their relationship yet. And so she asks Ricky, which was definitely the wrong person to ask for this, but anyways, she asks Ricky to help her plan a surprise for EJ. So they set up a beautiful canoe scene indoors, as this camp has no bodies of water whatsoever, and then Ricky brings EJ in. She admits that she'd hoped that they would spend the whole day together and was really looking forward to them having a win after yesterday. And then she goes forward and asking him to be her date to camp prom. But then unfortunately EJ does the worst thing ever and says that they're not allowed having dates to prom. It's against camp policy, and so he can't go with her.
I really wish I could, but there's a rule. No dates allowed to the prom. It's a Shallow Lake tradition, so nobody's feelings can get hurt.
Oh. Well, that is very progressive, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm sorry, but how is that your response to that? And it's not even like he tried to soften the blow either. To say no to being your girlfriend's date to something is wild to me, especially because it would have been so easy for him to be like, oh yeah, sure, we can go, but like keep it on the down low because we're not allowed having dates. Like the two of them going in secret would have been the perfect solution. And just the irony of him saying that it's done so that nobody gets hurt while he's actively hurting her is just so upsetting. But apparently he does agree to save the last dance for her, so I guess there's that. And that being said, I can't help but wonder if him saying no just goes back to EJ not knowing the difference between right and wrong and when it is okay to break the rules. Maybe that's just me giving him too much grace, but I do feel like that would explain his actions a bit better here. Before we move on to said prom though, I feel like we should check on Ricky first. And it's safe to say that he is not doing too hot. So Jet ends up finding him crying in his bunk, and he says that he can't believe that he let Color War slip through his fingers, obviously referring to Gina here. So Jet gives him the idea of distracting himself with his bucket list instead. But then the following day, he is confronted on his feelings for Gina once again. This is when Carlos tells him that he's going to have to inform Gina of his confession that he made on camera, as the trailer is going to be dropping next month. And his intel is saying that his confession is going to be included in that trailer. So if he wants her to hear it from him, he's going to have to tell her quite soon. But enough drama, let's get on to the dance. Yeah! So Gina enters and Ricky chokes on his punch. She then comes over to them and they both say wow in response. Ricky then tries to cover this up by blaming it on the polyester. Then to nobody's surprise, we reach the end of the dance and EJ did not make any time for Gina, as he was too busy trying to get people to go over their lines for the show. Which is valid, as their performance is tomorrow, but he still should have been more aware of the commitment that he made to Gina as well. And I really don't want to downplay EJ's stress in this whole situation, but I really feel like he could have benefited from a lesson in like time management in this season. But anyways, understandably so, this is basically the final straw for Gina, and so it's time for the two of them to call it quits. So Gina goes to EJ and she tells him that he missed the last dance. He curses and says that he can put on something for him, but she tells him to stop. She says that they've had 2 very different nights and 2 very different summers as well. He excuses this as being due to the fact that it's opening night tomorrow, but she suggests that it's deeper than that. That he's graduated and his world has gotten a lot bigger now, whereas she's still busy trying to occupy her time with all of the fun things. He argues that he can do all of that too, but she counters that he already did do all of that back when he was a camper there. And sorry to interrupt, but I really don't like this take. I feel like she's suggesting that after you graduate, you have to grow up and not have any fun anymore, whereas I really don't think that that's the problem here. To me, I just see EJ working tirelessly to try to prove himself to his dad. But if you want to make this about being in different places in your life, Gina, go right ahead. So she goes on to list all of the things that he missed out on this summer, and he notices that all of those things have one person in common. Which I really don't think that that was the right argument to make here, EJ, and it is very reminiscent to his breakup with Nini from the first season. Like, yes, there are some unresolved feelings between the two of them, but I still feel like Gina has worked hard to try to make their relationship work despite that. And I don't consider Ricky to be at fault for this breakup at all, actually. That is if you're able to take like the show creator's intended results out of the equation. So EJ says that he knows that she has history with Ricky, but she argues that she was trying to make a future with him. He tries to reassure her that he knows that he doesn't have a solid plan for the fall, but maybe, and she cuts him off saying that maybe isn't good enough for her. She then says that her whole life has been about change and that maybe is all she's ever known. And now this is when everything clicked for me in terms of her character arc, as it brought me right back to what her and Ricky connected over in regards to their shared need for stability. I feel like EJ was able to offer that for her in the previous season, but unfortunately now he's not, and I feel like her bringing that up here was just so well done. So of course she then insinuates that maybe this should be the end of them, that she came to the dance alone and maybe she should leave alone as well. He asks her not to do this, saying that they're great together, which I found to be an interesting comment because I'm just like, yeah, you were great together last season when you were actually allowed to be great. Now you have not. And Gina agrees with me on this as she says that they were great together for about 5 minutes at the beginning of the summer, but that they haven't really been together this summer, and that if this is a preview for their future together, then she's going to have to skip ahead. And everything she's saying here, I'm just like, yes, this is all very valid. She says that she can't be a maybe anymore or ever, and that he's great, and then he finishes her sentence for her and says, but it's over. She then questions if it's really over if they never really got a chance to start.
I can't be a maybe anymore, EJ. Not now and not later. Look. You're wonderful.
But it's over.
Can it really be over if it never really got a chance to start?
And that last line from Gina is really the one that gets me, because I feel like it speaks to more than just their situation, in that they're characters now from a show that have lost one of its main characters, and so now they have to rework things to make the second ship from the first season into their now endgame for the show. And so in reality, these two were just doomed from the start of the 3rd season, which just hurts, and it does really beg the question if something can be over if it never really got a chance to start. But it's time for me to wipe my tears, as once one door closes, another opens, and this time that other door is Rena. So with all that being said, let's move on to our final chapter, chapter 5. So Gina runs out after her conversation with EJ. Ricky notices this and goes after her, and the two of them meet in the coat check. He asks her if she's okay, and she makes a joke about the two of them always meeting like this. So he says that while he has her, there's something important that he needs to tell her. So the confession thing obviously weighing down on him. But then she turns around and he can now see that she's been crying. So he obviously says that it can wait if there's something that she's going through. She thanks him and then drops her purse on accident. They both reach down to get it and then share a look as she's grabbing her things.
Hey, well, I have you. There's something important I kind of have to tell you, if you have a sec.
You do?
It can wait if there's something you're working through.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey. Hey, it's okay. I got that. It's okay.
And man, these two are really good at sharing looks at each other. I feel like it's happened after every conversation that they've had this season. And as far as this scene is concerned, I do really like the callback to the first season. And I also really like how he encourages her that everything is going to be okay while they're grabbing her things. But part of me is a little bit annoyed that they're making them happen so quickly after she literally just broke up with EJ, but I feel like I'm just gonna have to get over that as it is the reality of this season. Later that night, they run into each other once again, and she asks what he was going to tell her earlier. He then admits that he told Carlos something in private that got caught on camera, and she asks what it is until they both notice EJ walking by. Ricky then asks if something is going on, and Gina says that they broke up, but she doesn't want to talk about it. And now it's my turn to do a 180 because I know that I've been complaining about this ship for the majority of this season, but honestly, I feel like I would have been fully game if he just kissed her here. Just like, finally, you're single, let's suck some face. Would that be problematic? Maybe, but sometimes it's the problematic ships that are just more fun. And I feel like you can't deny that that would have made for just a top tier moment. But of course, he does not do this and instead comes up with an excuse as to what he said to Carlos. She responds that there's nothing wrong with a little friendly fib, obviously alluding to what he just said being the fib. So the following day we have our show, which honestly doesn't include that much ship content. Nini does make her return though, and she goes on to hand out her opening night good luck notes. And in her note to Ricky, she gives him a lottery ticket, which is the last thing that he needs to complete his bucket list. Which confused me because it seemed like they were hinting at the fact that Nini is the one who always knows what Ricky really needs, which just seems like an odd thing to include when we are shifting endgames here. Or maybe it's to say that he won the lottery with Gina, as it wasn't until Nini left that he was really able to open his eyes to her. And so actually, yeah, that's probably it. I think I just cracked the code there. But I don't know, I also saw some people online saying that it's to symbolize her closing the chapter on their childhood, but I don't really understand how that makes sense and what the symbolism of the lottery ticket would be there. Oh, I guess like you have to be a certain age to buy a lottery ticket, maybe? I don't know. You guys can explain this one to me in the comments because I'm a bit at loss for it. Anyways, we then jump forward to 1 month later. We see the cast watch the trailer for the docuseries together, and in this trailer, they allude to Ricky and Gina getting together. Afterwards, Gina goes to EJ to apologize, but he says that they all saw it coming. Then everybody leaves, and Ricky asks Gina if there's anything that they can do to stop this documentary from coming out. She says no, and that EJ is wrong as she didn't see them coming, and that he has been a surprise since the day they met. She then says that she doesn't have maybe feelings for him, that he's not a maybe to her, he's a yes. And this line in particular kind of confused me because how would Ricky know about all of the maybe stuff? Like he wasn't there for EJ and Gina's breakup. I mean, I guess I can assume that she told him, but why are we making this about her breakup with EJ when this is supposed to be their moment where they're getting together? It almost seems like spiteful, like they're trying to tell us don't ship them. They're the maybe, so you're not supposed to ship them, but you should ship them because they're not a maybe, so ship them. And I don't like being told what to ship. And also, I'd rather their moment be about them and not the comparison to the ship that we just lost. But anyways, Gina says that she likes to know where she stands with people, and so now he knows where he stands with her. Then we get a callback to her confession from season 1/2, where she says that she can now walk out with her head held high and never look back again. That is, unless he stops her. And then he does stop her, and he kisses her. She then pulls him in for another kiss, and then he uses her catchphrase. And that, my friends, is how we wrap up season 3.
Unless you stop me.
Wait.
So I honestly want to love this scene, like I really do, because I feel like it does have all of the right pieces. I can't help but compare it to the I love you scene from season 1, which I personally feel like was done a lot better. But at the same time, I know that we shouldn't compare it because with that time we were dealing with two people who actually dated in real life. And so I know that that chemistry sometimes just can't be replicated. But I also feel like I would have been just so much more on board with this if it happened just a little bit later. Because I would have liked to see more of Gina falling for him again. I guess the point is that you're supposed to believe that she has been in love with him since the first season, but I personally feel like they're relying too heavily on that. And because of that, we don't actually get to see her fall for him again here, which is something that I would have really liked to see. Because we got lots of Ricky falling in this season and confessing his feelings for her, and so I'm honestly fine on his side of things. But we didn't get much of Gina's perspective, and the main reason for that is that she was in a relationship this whole time. But I also wish that they could have focused more on her need for stability and Ricky's ability to be able to offer that for her. I know that they touched on that a bit with all of the maybe stuff, but I feel like if they could have hammered that home and used wording that was unique to them, then I would have been way more on board with this scene. Nonetheless, they are together now, which results in some great moments from the 4th season, which I feel like I've been hinting at ever since the start of this video, so enough talk, let's get into season 4. So we start off our new year the night before with Ricky sneaking into Gina's room through her window. He picks her up and kisses her and says that he wants to share a melody with her. It reminded him of her as he can't get it out of his head either. He then asks if they can write the song together and she says that she likes the sound of that before they kiss once again.
It could be a song, it could be nothing. I just thought maybe we could write this one together.
Well, I like the sound of that.
Now this kind of bugged me, and I know that I just hyped us up to get ready for moments that I do like, but like, when has Gina ever written a song? Or shown any interest in songwriting? Never. That was always a him and Nini thing, and so it just feels weird to me and almost like they're forcing this onto them. I understand that this is a musical series and they're now the main ship, and so they're giving them music. But at the same time, I feel like it would have made way more sense if Ricky just wrote the song and then they performed it together instead. But I don't want to be all negative, and so I just wanted to say that I do like Ricky sneaking into her room and all of their kisses. I thought that that was really sweet. The topic then changes to them going back to school and things being weird now that the documentary has come out. Gina says that she doesn't want to hear everybody's opinions on them, and then asks if maybe they could keep their relationship a secret. And now this is something I'm on board with. I love a dating in secret trope almost as much as I love a fake dating trope or an enemies to lovers trope. So Ricky says that a secret relationship sounds spicy, and that as long as they're in us, he's in, and then kisses her once again. And then we come to meet our main source of conflict for this couple in this season. So to quickly summarize our non-romantic course of events. In this universe, they are filming a 4th installment of the High School Musical franchise, and the drama department has been cast as featured extras in the movie. This movie also includes a new male lead played by Mac, who also happens to be Gina's childhood crush. So Ricky is immediately intimidated by this, and the fact that their relationship is being kept a secret right now does not help that whatsoever. In drama department news, the school is putting on High School Musical 3 for their fall production, and so naturally Ricky and Gina are shooting for the leads of Troy and Gabriella. Back to our couple, that night we see Ricky sneak into Gina's room once again, and she shows him the lyrics that she's written to the melody that he showed her earlier. She starts to sing and then he joins in as we are transported back to various moments throughout their history. Like Ricky's car after homecoming, the When There Was Me and You scene, and then to Valentine's Day. Remember with the whole chocolate situation? I bet you didn't think they would shout it out in this season, but they did. And I feel like for that last one, they should have used a scene from camp instead. But I guess this song is all about things working out this time, and so maybe that's the reason for that. Afterwards, they kiss again, and then that is how we wrap up the first episode. The following day, we see that Ricky is still trying to learn the ropes of their new secret relationship, as he asks Gina if he can stand next to her during a dance rehearsal for the movie. So she clarifies that people can see them dancing, but not kissing. Later, he pretends to bump into her, and reveals that he watched Mac's show, which is the source of her childhood crush, and he calls the show bad. Gina agrees that the show can be cringy, but that it was her only constant thing growing up. She then gets asked to fill in for the main female lead, which is also Mac's romantic co-star, and so Ricky watches over this, very unsure about it. But enough drama, as it's time for Ricky and Gina's first date. So Ricky leaves a note for Gina in her locker telling her to turn around, then he gives her another note telling her to meet him at the secret staircase. He then tells her that this is part 1 of their first official date. But Gina is still unsure about how rehearsals went with her filling in for the lead. Ricky encourages her, saying that what he saw was a great dancer, and then makes a diss at Mac. She goes on to defend him and then adds that he has a girlfriend anyways, which is is like completely irrelevant to their conversation and definitely a bit of a red flag for what's to come. But despite that, I do really enjoy this scene, and just the whole shtick with like Ricky trying to be secretive and whatever is my favorite thing. On to their date, Ricky surprises Gina with a trip to the shelter to hang out with some puppies, which caught me a bit off guard at first, but damn, what a great first date idea, especially when you have a shelter that looks like that. He then apologizes for making fun of Mac's show, saying that if it means something to her, then it means something to him as well. And as someone who also has very deep interest, this comment just really resonated with me. He then admits that he was a little bit threatened by Mac, and she laughs, saying that he was her childhood crush, emphasis on was. Then he has her sit down as he plays the show's theme song for her.
I'm sorry I was making fun of Mark and Spark today.
I know it's a cheesy show,
But it means something to you. So it means something to me too. And as they say in musicals, sit down and let me sing you a song.
do they say that in musicals?
Maybe. I've never seen one.
And so yeah, I love every bit of this. First of all, I love the open communication. Ricky is telling her his concerns and she's not devaluing them, but listening to him and reassuring him instead. And then playing her favorite show's theme song for her, like, my god, I would probably die if somebody did that for me. And I honestly just like seeing a happy, healthy relationship on this show for once, as I feel like it's been a hot minute since we've seen that. So she kisses him after the song and thanks him, and then their date is cut short by an emergency HSM3 cast list meeting. So Gina arrives to this, and then Ricky pretends to arrive after her, and of course they are both cast as Troy and Gabriella. But then things take a turn once Gina gets a call to replace the female lead in High School Musical 4. And despite this news probably coming as a bit threatening to Ricky, he does not make this known, as he goes on to be an incredibly supportive boyfriend. We see this the following morning when he gets up at 6 a.m. to take Gina to set. She makes sure that he knows that this means a lot to her, that he's not freaked out about her stepping into this role, and he says that she's the easiest person in the world to root for, and that he just wishes he didn't have to keep it all to himself before he kisses her. This moment is unfortunately then cut short as well, as Ricky is called out for being an extra in the main cast area and is asked to leave. But another sweet scene nonetheless, and I like how Ricky has to make sure that this random guy knows that they're just platonic friends, even though he literally just saw them kiss. This secret dating thing might have been Gina's idea, but Ricky does not fail when it comes to committing to a bit. This brings us to our first High School Musical 3 table read, and when they get to Can I Have This Dance, Miss Jen says that they can skip the songs for today. But then Gina goes ahead and starts singing, and then Ricky joins in. They then continue into a fully choreographed dance number around the rehearsal room. And then in the one-on-one, Ricky admits that they stayed up until 3 a.m. rehearsing it, which is kind of wild considering that they also got up at 6 a.m. to take Gina to set. And also, I feel like I just have to mention that this is something I do like, because dancing is Gina's thing. It has always been Gina's thing since the beginning, and so this makes way more sense to me that they would bond over this instead of songwriting, when that has never been their thing, but I'll let it go. Then this brings us to Gina's first scene in the movie. Beforehand, Ricky whispers to Gina that she's a yes, not a maybe, which again, I don't like this callback because it just makes me think of EJ and it makes me sad. But during the scene, Gina goes off script and starts improvising, and this causes Ricky to let out a wow by mistake, as she is known in the series for not doing too well at improv. But we later come to find out that she was able to find the motivation here because of Ricky. This scene is a goodbye to Miss Darbus, and so she channels how she feels about having to say goodbye to Ricky after he graduates, which I just can't imagine how triggering that must be for her, not just because of her home life, but also because of what happened in her last relationship. Afterwards, Mac asks Gina how she was able to crush it in one take, and so she offers him a deal. She says that she'll teach him how to be a real teenager if he can teach her how to deal with fame. He agrees to this, but they don't specify what that will entail quite yet. Meanwhile, Ricky is struggling because he's worried that she won't have time for the musical with her new busy schedule. So basically a fear that he knows quite well after the events of the second season. But he doesn't want to fall into old habits, and so he questions what the new Ricky would do. And so he concludes that the new Ricky would surprise Gina by decorating her trailer. When she sees this, she loves it and hugs him, calling him sweet. He then confesses that while watching her today, something hit him. He says that she was wrong about her not being able to get things right the first time, as she did so today after doing her scene in one take. They then both agree that they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that she still has time for the musical. And then they kiss again because they're in love, and they do that a lot now.
I can rehearse for HSM3 after school, on the weekends, even during secret makeout times if that's what it takes. I don't want...
Hey, we're gonna find a way to have it all, Ricky. You know how much the musical means to me. I don't know how, but I think the right answer will appear.
And again, I feel like this is another great moment that really highlights their excellent communication skills. And I mean, just talk about a polar opposite this is to how Ricky was in the second season. I love how Gina is once again validating his feelings and reassuring him that everything is going to be okay, and I feel like you can immediately tell how much her words are able to calm him. But we're only at episode 3, which means we still need some more conflict to really get this ball rolling. So at the end of this episode is when we are introduced to the couple's main 2 hurdles for this season. For Gina, it's that Miss Jen calls in the girl that Gina replaced in HSM 4, who is named Danny, to replace Gina as Gabriella in their production of High School Musical 3. And for Ricky, Mac gives Gina her first lesson in fame, which includes the 2 of them dating for publicity. And there's also this whole other thing with Gina's mom, but we'll get to that later. So it's now Halloween, which is apparently the perfect time for Gina and Ricky to break some news to one another. We see Miss Jen ask Ricky if he's sure that he wants to be the one to tell Gina that she's out of their production, and he insists that she deserves to hear it from him. Though I personally can't seem to ignore the fact that it feels wrong to replace someone in their high school production with someone who doesn't even go to their school. But no one else was auditioning, so it is what it is. Then we find out that Gina is waiting to tell Ricky about Mac's proposal in person. She feels as though once she explains that it's strictly professional and will benefit her career, that he'll understand. And this was honestly quite shocking to me because this is how we find out that she agreed to his proposal. And I'm like, just spitballing here, but I feel like if you have a boyfriend, then you don't agree to fake date somebody else, even if it is just for publicity. Anyway, she then goes on to freak out about calling Ricky her boyfriend and the fact that they'll be saying I love you soon. So clearly, she is not fazed. Moving on to Gina's Halloween party, Ricky has come as a Baywatch lifeguard and not Batman to match her Catwoman costume. I'm not exactly too sure how Ricky confused the two, but Gina says that it's working for him. He then tries to segue into telling her that she's been replaced, but then she stops him, saying that there's only one rule tonight, which is that they can't talk about the show or the movie. He then asks her to make an exception as he has something big to tell her, and then she says that she has something to tell him as well. But of course, they both end up not actually getting to tell the other their news themselves, as that's just not how this show works. So Mac then arrives, cutting them off, as well as Danny shortly after him, dressed as Gabriella from High School Musical 3. The gang then goes on to do a tarot card reading, but before that, I feel like I have to mention that Ricky does spit in Mac's drink. So obviously, he's handling all of this very well. During the reading, Mac somehow correlates the death card to being about something special going on between him and Gina. And so Ricky is of course quick to ask what he means by that. And in response, Mac tells him to check his TikTok by midnight, as that is where they had planned to announce their relationship. Ricky asks if this is a Halloween prank, and so Gina agrees that they can go with that. Then in a way, Danny kind of saves her here as she announces that she is going to be taking over as Gabriella. Gina is shocked, asking if she's been kicked out of the show, but Ricky insists that this is a good thing. But Gina does not see it this way, and so Ricky turns things on her, saying that he's not the one posting a selfie with Mac at midnight. She retorts that that's just for publicity, and then things take a weird turn. Courtney then chimes in, saying that they're taking their roles as Troy and Gabriella a little too seriously, and then this causes Gina and Ricky to link hands and reveal their relationship. Gina announces that they don't want to hide anymore because they know that they can get through anything while they're together. And then Ricky agrees and kisses her, and I'm honestly just so confused.
Troy and Gabriella are characters, not a real couple.
Whoa.
What?
We are a couple, and I don't really want to hide anymore because we know we can get through anything. Right, Ricky?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to assume that these two had a conversation about being ready to tell people about their relationship, but I don't understand why we didn't actually get to see that. I get that they probably wanted this moment to shock the viewers as well, but at the same time, it just made me feel like I missed something. And it also feels weird for me for them to do this while they're currently fighting about said relationship. I guess maybe it's to show that even though they are fighting, that doesn't mean that they're not still in love and together, but I do feel like Ricky's reaction is very telling in this moment. And speaking of Ricky, things then get even worse for him as her mom enters. She introduces him as her classmate and friend, and Ricky is disappointed to hear that she hasn't told her mom about him. He then runs off, and on his way home, he leaves her a voicemail saying that he needs a minute. So Gina is now in solution mode. The following day, she comes up with the very unrealistic idea of shooting all of her scenes for High School Musical 4 in one day. And surprisingly, everybody agrees to this, and so that is what they do, and it works, and it's fine. And I'm just like, how is that possible? I guess maybe she has a smaller role than I assumed, but either way, sorry, a little bit unrealistic, but that's okay. Ricky, on the other hand, if you'll recall, he needed a minute, and so he decides to spend that minute by going and visiting his brother, EJ. And this honestly just made me so happy because I was really disappointed thinking that he wasn't going to be in this season. So Ricky confides in EJ on how he feels as though everything is only ever okay for a minute, and how he's afraid of losing people. And so EJ advises him that sometimes things just don't work out and you have to shake it off and hold out hope for what's next. He also tells him to stop running, that he has so many people around him in his life that care about him, but he has to let them care. And he needs to speak his mind to those he cares about, because by not doing that, he's just hurting himself. And I feel like this was all very good for Ricky to hear and much needed after the events of season 2. And you could also tell that he was on the right path with Gina, but there was still instances of him holding stuff in, like with the whole trailer situation. And speaking of Gina, they do also talk a little bit about her as well. EJ says that losing her hurt like hell, and hearing him say that just made me want to cry, but he also says that he's at peace with the way that things worked out. Although there is also a lot of things that he says that he would have done differently. He then brings things back to him, and he says if he throws away what they have or hurts her, then he'll never forgive him. Ultimately, Ricky decides that he's not going to run away this time, and then he questions why they didn't hang out more in high school. To which EJ replies that it's because he was too busy stealing his girlfriends, which honestly might be my favorite line from this entire series. And overall, that was a very brief summary of their conversation, and so I really hope that I did do it justice, because while it is a little bit of a detour to our ship timeline, I do really appreciate this scene, and I feel like it is really important to highlight it. It does a great job of showcasing the hurt that Ricky has suffered, not just from Nini, but his whole home life situation as well, and it's a good lesson in the importance of speaking your mind, because those that care are going to listen to you. And I also think it's important for him to have this moment and figure out what's going on with himself first so that he can be a good boyfriend to Gina. Back in Salt Lake, we see that Gina's mom has invited Mac over for dinner with them. She says that she really likes Mac, and this confuses Gina, and she reminds her of her no boys rule, which I guess is supposed to explain why she didn't tell her about Ricky. But what it wouldn't explain is why she did tell her about EJ a couple seasons ago. But I guess the excuse to that is that maybe her mom jumped to conclusions about EJ being a big brother figure to her. But she says that she seems so happy these days, and Gina is surprised that she thinks that this is because of Mac. She then tells her that there's a lot of things that she doesn't know about, and they then allude to her filling her in on all of those things, including her relationship with Ricky, who, speaking of, has just returned from his minute with EJ and has brought her, that's right, a box of chocolates. So we see him walk to her door, but then he realizes that Mac is over, and so he turns around to leave. Luckily though, Gina notices him outside, and so she goes to him. She yells at him that she told her mom about them, and then runs to him, and they share a kiss in the rain. And I wish I could show you guys a clip from this scene, but unfortunately there is copyrighted music playing throughout it, so I cannot. But just imagine it playing, I mean, it will be playing above me, so look at it and appreciate its beautifulness, because it is a very nice scene, and I am a sucker for a rain kiss. But of course, although things seem to be perfect now, our story is far from over. And we still have a few more things to go over before we can reach our happy ending. The first being Ricky's college decision. So he learns that he has gotten into Salt Lake City College on the condition that he can get straight A's for the rest of the year. This doesn't concern him, as Gina is a great student and he feels like he can do anything with her by his side. But of course, Gina then gets a call to do another movie alongside Mac that is filming in New Zealand. Just like Zombies 4! How funny is that? 2 zombies mentions in one video? What more could you want? So now they have another set of things to tell the other person about, but before we get to that, we do have some more L-word drama. So Ricky says that he wants to say it to her before he tells her about his college plans so that he can get things right this time. And Gina tells Miss Jen that it would be easier to tell him about the New Zealand thing if she knew that he loved her. She feels as though she's always the one to put herself out there first and doesn't want that to be the case this time. Then this brings us to our production of High School Musical 3. And I just couldn't help but wonder if this musical actually has been adapted for stage or if Miss Jen just did so on her own. Either way, I am very here for it. Before the show, they both say that they have something to tell the other person, but then get called out to stage. So he asks her to meet him in the dressing room during intermission. Before we get to that though, they then decide to give us some EJ and Gina closure. So all of this has caused Gina to do some reflecting on what went down over the summer. So she asks EJ to meet her in the hall and starts off with apologizing for what happened, saying that she was hurt about his plans to leave and felt like he was keeping things from her because he didn't trust her. But now she's realized that she's doing the exact same thing. She says that she hasn't told Ricky about this movie because she doesn't want to ruin his night, and it's clear to her now that he didn't want to ruin her summer. EJ confesses that there's a lot of things he would have done differently, just like he said earlier to Ricky, and then he asks her what her plan is. She says that she was just starting with an apology to him, and so he says that he's sorry as well, and then he jokes that they'll always have risotto, which causes her to say that they literally never had risotto.
So what's the plan?
Oh, right. Okay, so I was starting with an apology to you, and then the rest is up for grabs. I'm sorry.
Gina, it's mutual. We'll always have risotto, though, right?
EJ, we literally never had risotto.
And now this honestly made me want to cry because as much as I have come around on Ricky and Gina after this season, these two are still my favorite from this entire show. And I just feel like I will forever mourn what we lost between them. And that line where Gina says that they literally never had it just crushes me because it just highlights what we lost and the fact that we truly never got to see them in a relationship. Like I feel like we deserve to see them together at East High, having their first date and like being a couple and getting risotto and all of that stuff. And we just never got it and it just makes me so sad. And so then I feel like this closure just ends up having the opposite effect on me as it reminds me what we lost and I'm just sad and wish that we got that instead. But I feel like we know this routine by now and it should not come to anyone's surprise that Gina does not get the chance to tell Ricky her news on her own. When intermission comes, Gina gets called to the auditorium to do a sound check for the movie's press conference, and then Ricky finds out through her mom about the movie and the fact that she has to leave for it tonight. This brings us to Act 2 where Ricky tells her that she doesn't have to explain anything and that he's happy for her. She goes to reply but then is prompted to get into wardrobe. In the confessional, Gina stresses about all of that being too easy and how she hoped that he would put up a bit more of a fight. But she concludes that at least now she has the answer as to what she's supposed to do. Ricky, on the other hand, says that the last time he told a girl to stay home for him, it blew up in his face. And so he says that this is all for the best and that their relationship was too good to be true. And so now I'm just a bit confused as to what the whole point of his conversation with EJ was if he wasn't actually going to take any of that advice. But anyways, after the show, Gina gives a little speech about everyone and how special they are to her. To EJ, she says that she knows that she doesn't always get things right the first time, but is glad that they can laugh about it now, which bugged me a little bit because I'm like, that's how we're gonna conclude their relationship? That it was her just like not getting it right the first time? Like I feel like that is so disrespectful to the ship and their entire arc from the second season. But to Ricky, she says that with him she feels so seen, understood, and known. They're both crying and so he goes to her and tells her that it's okay.
But with you, I feel so seen and so understood and so known.
It's okay.
And man, I felt this way before too when we had that flashback confession from season 1, but like damn, this girl is a great crier. She really is able to just like bawl completely, and it is infectious, I will admit. After Gina leaves, Ricky asks EJ what to do because he's realized that he didn't tell her that he loves her. I should mention that earlier, Ricky's parents advised him to go bigger with Gina and not just tell her that he loves her, but write her a song instead. So Ricky runs into Gina's press conference and asks if it's too late. He then starts to perform his song and then the rest of the cast joins in. Gina even sings the last line back to him before he kisses her. And then we have probably the dumbest reveal in this entire show. I'm sorry, but I just didn't like this at all. Anyways, Ricky says that he wanted to tell her that he loved her first, and he goes to say that he's sorry, but she interrupts him, asking if he still has the hat from Thanksgiving. And he of course says that he actually has it on him as it's his favorite hat. And so she tells him to check under the tag, which says, "If you're reading this, I love you too, Ricky." He asks if that's been there all along, and she says, "Just like me."
Okay, well, check under the tag. Yeah. That's right.
If you are reading this, I love you too, Ricky. Has this been there all along?
Just like me.
And I'm sorry, but she gave him that hat like a week after knowing him. And I know that this show just loves to rewrite history, but this time it was just too far for me. Like, I can only suspend my disbelief so far, and this is it. Like, this is how far I can go. We've reached the end point for me. Like, what if he had read that back when he was still with Nini? I mean, that wouldn't have happened because that didn't exist back then. I just refused to believe it. But that would have been like the most awkward situation. And I'm sorry if you like this part, like, more power to you, but I just personally refuse to accept this as canon. Not very many things anger me, but this did. So he says that he knows that she needs to go and he's sorry if he's too late, but then this causes her to explain that he actually missed quite a bit. We then find out that before Ricky came in, Gina had actually made her own decision to throw the director under the bus, as she announces that she's only agreed to shoot the movie if it films in Salt Lake. So Ricky says that it's finally paid to be late, and she says that she's not going anywhere. Gina's mom comes in and gives Ricky her blessing, and then that is basically where we end things. Now, talk about a wild ride, and despite my complaints, I do stand by the fact that I feel like season 4 was very pleasantly surprising. surprising. It was extremely meta, and I like that it brought the series back to being a High School Musical spinoff. And I really like how it bridges the gap between 2 and 4, and it kind of makes me feel like season 3 is just like the one where they went off the rails. One thing I will stand by though is the fact that I feel like Ricky does lose a bit of his character after Nini's departure. And I honestly don't know if it's more noticeable in this season or the last one, but it's definitely there. I just feel like there's something about introducing a character that is just so motivated by someone else that when you take that person away, it just leaves that character to feel a bit empty, in my opinion. I almost felt like Ricky lost a bit of his purpose after Nini left, and there was just something about him that I feel like was never the same after season 2. But of course, I want to know your guys' thoughts on the love square, so please leave all of them in the comments down below. I can't wait to read all about it. I don't know why, but I feel like the Ricky and Gina shippers are oftentimes very loud, and so I'm a bit nervous to state my opinions on them, like publicly, and not get attacked. But I've said what I said now, so I can't take it back. But as always, please let me know what ship you'd like to see me cover next. Anything is on the table. It doesn't have to be from Disney. I honestly have no idea what's next, but I'm sure I'll figure it out as I always do. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope it wasn't too long. And I hope you have a great weekend. Love you guys. Bye, bye, bye. Oh, one more thing. Out of the Old, best song from this entire show, and I will stand by that till the day I die.